Jiang Ping, a transmigrator, had by a twist of fate crossed into the body of a man on the verge of death, and soon after a system descended upon him as well. Relying on this system to defy heaven and alter his fate, he went on to spark countless entanglements with one stunning heroine after another. After a soft sigh, a figure appeared in a gauzy dress as thin as cicada wings. The faintly revealed skin beneath the fabric shimmered with a seductive luster, her posture graceful and alluring, a few playful strands of hair clinging to her fair slender neck, adding an extra touch of sultry charm. The proud swell of her chest and the delicate slenderness of her waist formed a flawless curve, radiating a temptation that was hard for any mortal to resist. This woman was none other than Lin Miaoyin. Senior brother Jiang Ping, your allotted lifespan is nearly at its end. Do you have any last wishes? I will help you fulfill them all, she said softly. Jiang Ping had originally been a transmigrator from Earth. The instant he opened his eyes in this new world, his first impulse was to find a crooked-necked tree and hang himself. The reason was simple: he had crossed into the body of an old man, well past his 70th year. To keep living, he had no confidence; to die, he had no resolve. Just then the so-called system descended as well. Congratulations, perfect life system has awakened. Jiang Ping ignored Lin Miaoyin, completely cursing inwardly. System, damn you, what use are you to me now? I am already a man at death's door. The reason was straightforward. Jiang Ping had only 1 year of lifespan left. Lifting his head to gaze at the peerlessly graceful Lin Miaoyin, his heart was a tangle of conflicting emotions. In his memories, she was a true daughter of heaven, blessed with exceptional cultivation talent. The master of the Yinyang Hall, Shen Peizhi, happened upon Lin Miaoyin while traveling outside and immediately desired to bring her back to the Yinyang Hall for careful nurturing. Yet Lin Miaoyin stubbornly refused, unwilling to be separated from her beloved Jiang Ping. Shen Peizhi had initially intended to kill Jiang Ping with a single palm strike, but she feared the karmic backlash such an act might bring upon her cultivation path. Thus she had no choice but to bring Jiang Ping to the Yinyang Hall, as well as signing him as a menial disciple in the herb garden. Under Shen Peizhi's guidance, Lin Miaoyin soon awakened the water spirit constitution. Her cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds, and now she had already formed her golden core. Jiang Ping, however, remained stuck at the 5th layer of the qi refining realm, unmoving as a stone. Even this meager level was only achieved because Lin Miaoyin had relentlessly pressed her cherished pills upon him, one she herself could scarcely bear to consume. Brother Jiang, I had originally planned to bury you after a year and then enter seclusion. But my master has divined that I will soon face a tribulation and insists I immediately go into closed-door cultivation. By the time I emerge, you will likely already have turned into a mere handful of yellow earth. Tell me, what wish do you have? Today I will satisfy them all. As Lin Miaoyin spoke, her words came out haltingly, a blush blooming across her cheeks. Jiang Ping immediately understood what it was she wished to do. Yet he himself was incapable. He could no longer rise to the occasion. Jiang Ping let out a long sigh. Miaoyin, why don't you get me 365 red pills instead? The moment Lin Miaoyin heard this, her head felt like it exploded. You incorrigible old rascal, she thought. You are already at death's door, and still you cannot behave yourself properly. Jiang Ping himself felt helpless. On Earth he had been a pure-bodied youth, yet after transmigrating he had ended up in the shell of a decrepit old man. Was he truly to die burdened with such regrets? The question was, why did this fellow demand precisely 365 red pills, not one more and not one less? Lin Miaoyin understood in an instant. With only a single year of lifespan remaining, he clearly intended to throw caution to the wind and indulge in debauchery every single day. Fuming, Lin Miaoyin tossed a jade bottle to him and flew off. There aren't that many. Use them sparingly, she said as she left. Jiang Ping had no mind to bother with anything else. He urgently wished to examine this broken system that had arrived along with him. With a single thought, Jiang Ping summoned the system. Perfect life system, bind or not bind, appeared before his eyes. What a stupid question. Of course I'll bind it. If I don't, I'm going to die anyway. Is there even anything to ask? He muttered inwardly. In view of the host repeatedly insulting the system, the novice gift pack is revoked and a single current function is awakened. System, damn you, Jiang Ping cursed in his heart. I am nearly dead, and you still insist on making things difficult for me. By increasing the goodwill between the host and heroines, all expenditures will be returned 100-fold to 10,000-fold, the system intoned. Jiang Ping felt utterly defeated. What use is that? What use? With this frail body of mine, what use could such a function possibly have? Now, even if he called to the heavens, no one would answer. Even if he cried to the earth, it would not respond. Jiang Ping picked up the half-broken tree branch propped beside the table, using it as a cane to force himself to stand. Trembling, he shuffled toward the inner room. Just then the gates of the herb garden were pushed open, and a clear-featured female disciple stepped in. Senior brother Jiang, she called, hurrying to his side and quickly supporting his arm. If she had shouted, Senior brother Jiang, any louder, that single call would likely have startled him into falling over. So it's you, Jiang Ping said. The newcomer was He Qinghuan, an outer disciple of the Yinyang Hall. What business do you have? Jiang Ping asked. Senior brother Jiang, I would like to ask you for a few hundred-year spiritual herbs to exchange for a single pill. I wish to try one more time and see if I can reach foundation establishment. Perhaps I might succeed, she replied. Speaking of He Qinghuan, she too was a child of bitter fate. After entering the Yinyang Hall, she cultivated with relentless effort, yet her aptitude was so poor that no matter how she struggled, she could not advance. To make matters worse, He Qinghuan prided herself on her purity and refused to spare even a proper glance for ordinary male disciples. She had hoped to attach herself to some inner disciples of the sect, but how could those inner disciples ever take a fancy to her? Even if they did, they would only treat her as a plaything. Thus to this day, He Qinghuan had not even a single dual cultivation partner. At that moment, Jiang Ping's eyes suddenly rolled a sly idea, surfacing in his heart. The system had indicated that by increasing goodwill with heroines, he could receive rewards from 100-fold up to 10,000-fold. Why not test it with her and see whether it truly worked? If it really worked, perhaps there would be a way to extend his lifespan. With that thought, Jiang Ping's gnarled hand, wrinkled like old bark, suddenly darted out and pressed down upon He Qinghuan's tender jade-like hand. He Qinghuan's brows knitted together, her heart filled with disgust. It felt as if she had just been touched by, yet at this moment she needed his help and could only force herself to swallow the humiliation. In her heart, she vowed that once she advanced, the very first thing she would do would be to chop off this repulsive claw. Just then Jiang Ping noticed the system flashing briefly goodwill 20. He froze on the spot, thinking, damn, just how much does this girl despise me? Still, Jiang Ping understood perfectly well. He knew that He Qinghuan's only possible support at the moment was likely this decrepit old man himself, who otherwise why would she have come to beg him? With that in mind, Jiang Ping took out the bottle of red pills and waved it a few times before He Qinghuan's eyes. So long as junior sister is willing to accompany this old man, every day you may pick whatever herbs you like from the garden. Whatever trouble arises, I will shoulder it for you, he said. You know as well as I do that your attempt at foundation establishment is a matter of utmost urgency. Without my assistance, there is absolutely no way you will break through. I am not making things difficult for you. Think it over carefully, he added. With that, Jiang Ping leaned on his trembling branch, swaying with every step as he walked back into the room, leaving He Qinghuan standing outside utterly disoriented while he ignored her completely. Jiang Ping was confident. He believed he would surely win this gamble. After all, this was the cultivation world where strength reigned supreme. He Qinghuan's thoughts had turned to mush. Why is my life so miserable, she wondered. Having guarded her body like jade until now, was she truly about to be taken by this decrepit old man? Yet when she looked out over the vast stretches of spiritual herbs in the garden, then thought of the bottleneck, she simply could not break through. He Qinghuan gritted her teeth. In that instant, she followed Jiang Ping into the room and gently closed the door behind her. At that moment, He Qinghuan forced out a smile brimming with affected charm and was just about to speak when Jiang Ping cut her off. Heaven knows, earth knows, you know and I know, he said curtly. Then Jiang Ping tossed aside his branch, reached into the jade bottle, pulled out a single red pill, and shoved it into his mouth. Immediately, his entire body began to tremble as though seized by a fit, and he plunged headfirst into He Qinghuan's arms. Without even bothering to reach the bed, he began stripping right there on the floor. Jiang Ping felt a deep gloom in his heart. He realized that his lifespan and vitality were worsening by the day. He now needed another's help even to remove his own clothes. In less than a minute, Jiang Ping was drenched in sweat. Fine beads of perspiration covered his forehead and slid continuously down his cheeks, his breathing turning abnormally ragged as he panted like an old ox that had just plowed several acres of fields. At this moment, he was like a punctured balloon, all the vigor he had shown before vanishing in an instant. He felt his legs turn soft and powerless like boiled noodles that could exert no strength at all. Even standing upright became exceedingly difficult. His body trembled slightly, as though a light breeze could topple him. Helpless, He Qinghuan let out a faint sigh. She no longer knew whether she should lament the misery of having given her first time to such an old man or mourn the ill fortune that plagued her fate. Her expression wooden, she dressed herself piece by piece. When her gaze fell on the mottled traces of blood beneath her, her heart ached as if being sliced by 1,000 blades. After tidying her clothes, she clenched her teeth and used all her remaining strength to lift Jiang Ping's limp dog-like body onto the bed. Just then, the system suddenly prompted Jiang Ping Favorability 50, a reward 1 foundation establishment pill. The message struck his mind like a bolt of lightning on a clear day. In Jiang Ping's memories, a foundation establishment pill could increase a cultivator's success rate during foundation establishment by 80%. In other words, if he were to hand this foundation establishment pill to He Qinghuan right now, she would have virtually 100% certainty of successfully establishing her foundation. This was truly a heaven-sent stroke of fortune. However, he himself was merely a cultivator at the 5th level of the qi refining stage. For him, this foundation establishment pill was of limited use and could not extend his lifespan. Waves surged within Jiang Ping's heart. A foundation establishment pill as a reward for just 50% favorability. If favorability soared to 100%, would the rewards not defy the very heavens? Within the heavens punishment mountain range, the Yin Yang Hall was far from a first-rate sect. Treasures, such as the foundation establishment pill, were firmly clutched in the hands of the sect master and elders. Others could not even dream of touching them. In this cultivation world, for a cultivator to achieve foundation establishment was akin to ascending to the heavens in a single step. Jiang Ping glanced at the listless He Qinghuan and saw everything clearly in his heart. How could He Qinghuan possibly harbor genuine feelings for an old wreck like him? This was nothing more than a transaction of benefits. Yet she was the first woman he had encountered since his transmigration. Having shared a night as husband and wife, how could he bring himself to shortchange her? Jiang Ping patted the edge of the bed beside him. He Qinghuan walked over slowly, putting on an act as she leaned against his shoulder, and said in a coy tone, "Senior brother Jiang, you must keep your word. From now on, I can pick the spirit herbs in this medicine garden as I please, right?" Jiang Ping reached out and pinched He Qinghuan's chin, grinning, as he said, "Little girl, give your brother a smile, and I might just grant you an opportunity as vast as the heavens." He Qinghuan forced out a thin smile, muttering inwardly, "What opportunity could you possibly have? Isn't it just those spirit herbs?" Yet the words that followed from Jiang Ping's mouth caused her entire body to stiffen in an instant. "So long as you keep only me in your heart from now on and attend to me at all times, I will reward you with a foundation establishment pill and guarantee your success in establishing your foundation." Hearing this, He Qinghuan felt as though she were dreaming. She simply could not believe it. A foundation establishment pill was a divine treasure. How could Jiang Ping possibly possess one? But then her thoughts turned, and she remembered Lin Miaoyin. Could it be that Lin Miaoyin had given a foundation establishment pill to Jiang Ping, and he now truly intended to give it to her? In a flash, He Qinghuan grasped the crucial point. This old thing probably had only about a year left to live. What harm was there in devoting herself to him for a single year? If she truly managed to establish her foundation with the aid of the pill, she could become an inner disciple of the Yin Yang Hall and cultivate its superior martial art, the Tai Shanqingju. He Qinghuan's mind spun faster than a windmill. She understood everything in an instant, and any trace of displeasure vanished without a trace, sweeping away the gloom that had clouded her before. She seized Jiang Ping's withered hand and pressed it against her chest, vowing, "Heaven above as my witness, I He Qinghuan will remain loyal to senior brother Jiang alone in this lifetime. If I ever betray this oath, may I die a wretched death." Jiang Ping understood all too well the weight such vows carried in the cultivation world, where cultivators valued karma above all. Sure enough, in the very next instant, the system prompted, "Due to achieving 100% favorability with the female, lead a special reward is granted. 1 longevity pill and 1 copy of the Hahuan cultivation art." Damn system bro, you're finally showing some tenderness toward my cherishing of beauty. At this moment, seeing Jiang Ping trembling all over like a sieve, He Qinghuan thought that their less than an imminent affair had nearly cost this old fellow his life. That couldn't be right. Just that 1 minute, how could it amount to anything? "Senior brother Jiang, are you all right?" She now truly feared that Jiang Ping might breathe his last at any moment. She had yet to receive her foundation establishment pill. Having given her pure body to this old man, if she ended up gaining nothing, all that would be left to her would be the path of slitting her own throat. In truth, Jiang Ping was shaking purely from excitement. But his frail body was indeed in poor condition. Just that brief bout of excitement had already left him gasping for breath. No wonder He Qinghuan feared he might kick the bucket. "Qinghuan, you should head back for now." He Qinghuan stared wide-eyed at Jiang Ping. What did he mean by that? Was this old thing going back on his word? Jiang Ping grinned. "Come and attend to me again tomorrow. I'll give you the foundation establishment pill then." Hearing this, He Qinghuan sighed inwardly. This old codger was truly hard to serve. Already half dead, yet still clinging to those filthy thoughts and wanting to continue tomorrow. Forget it, she would indulge him. If pushed too hard, things might backfire. After all, as the saying went, good things take time. He Qinghuan left Jiang Ping, turning back to look at him every few steps, truly worried that the moment she stepped out he would kick his legs and pass away. Once she was gone, Jiang Ping excitedly reached at once into the system's exclusive storage space and retrieved the longevity pill. The system prompted, due to the host's life hanging by a thread, the first use of the longevity pill can only extend lifespan by 50 years. Jiang Ping nearly fell off the bed. That was enough, more than enough. 50 years would be sufficient for his rise. Without another word, Jiang Ping tossed the longevity pill straight into his mouth. Though he had transmigrated into this body, it was still at the 5th layer of the qi refining realm. He immediately felt an endless vitality spreading throughout his body. He watched as his withered skin recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. The sparse white hair on his head grew thicker, and among it there even sprouted a few thin strands of black. Overjoyed, Jiang Ping got out of bed to walk, but his leg gave way, and he fell flat on his face. Having shuffled about in a tottering gait for so long his body could not adapt to moving quickly all of a sudden, and he sprawled on the floor, arms and legs splayed everywhere. Lying motionless on the ground, what pleased Jiang Ping most at this moment was the change in his crotch. He felt that even without any special medicine, he should at least last longer than a single minute. After calming himself, Jiang Ping sat up and took out the rewarded Huan cultivation art from his storage space. The moment he opened the manual, he was dumbfounded. System, damn you, you're nothing but a pervert. Can you be serious for once? The entire Huan cultivation art consisted solely of illustrations, each depicting various dual cultivation postures, with acupuncture points carefully marked. As long as one guided their spiritual power according to the acupoint sequence detailed in the Huan cultivation art during intercourse, one could raise one's cultivation. This was merely the beginner stage. At the intermediate stage, one could also lead the partner to activate their spiritual power together, forming a cycle between the two. The stronger the partner's cultivation, the greater the benefit to oneself. As for the obscure and difficult content that followed, Jiang Ping couldn't be bothered to read it. Indeed, tomorrow I will give Xianxia a try. After all, this is a world of cultivation, although no one is causing trouble for me, right now strengthening the body and prolonging life is always beneficial. I wonder if when Miao Yin emerges from her retreat and finds that I am alive and well, will she be shocked? At that time, I must pin Miao Yin down, leaving no regrets. The next day, before the sun had even risen, Xianxia rushed to the medicinal garden. She simply could not wait. She hadn't slept well all night, fearing that Jiang Ping might have passed away in excitement the night before. Without any greeting, she pushed the door open and found Jiang Ping sitting cross-legged on the bed meditating. Xianxia stared at Jiang Ping in a daze, pondering what was happening. Could it be a moment of clarity before death? It is said that when people are close to death, they often exhibit a burst of vitality. Jiang Ping opened his eyes and looked at Xianxia at the door, saying, "What are you standing there for? Close the door and come in." Xianxia didn't even know how she walked in. Jiang Ping pulled her into his arms, refusing to let her reject him, and began tearing at her clothes. Xianxia let out a soft cry. Today, Jiang Ping seemed like a completely different person compared to yesterday. Did he eat that small bottle of red pills? Xianxia understood in her heart that this was Jiang Ping's last struggle, and she estimated that after today, she would be free from suffering. However, just as Jiang Ping delved deeper into their discussion, Xianxia sensed something was off. The entire morning, Jiang Ping showed no signs of stopping. Was this still the Jiang Ping she knew? He seemed like a different person. In truth, she couldn't blame Jiang Ping. He was in the early stages of practicing the Huan Gong, and he had nearly exhausted all his strength struggling to complete a cycle of spiritual energy according to the human Buddhist acupoints. Since it was his first time cultivating, he was quite clumsy and took the whole morning to accomplish it. This made Xianxia suffer. By the end, she lay on the bed, too weak to move. She truly could not comprehend how someone on the brink of death could be so vigorous. She was at the pinnacle of the 9th layer of Qi refinement, on the verge of foundation establishment, yet she was completely overwhelmed by a Qi refinement 5th layer waste. She couldn't wrap her head around it anymore. Whatever, if she couldn't understand it, then she wouldn't think about it. After all, if she could just get through today, this old guy should be done for. At that moment, Jiang Ping gently kissed Xianxia on the forehead, softly calling her name Xianxia before placing a pill in her arms. As the fragrance of the pill wafted through the air, Xianxia sat up from the bed instantly, no longer feeling sleepy or tired, primarily because she had lost the mood to feel tired. Having seen the foundation establishment pill before, she immediately recognized that this was the real deal, and the pill was crystal clear, indicating a high quality. Jiang Ping slowly got off the bed, turning his back to Xianxia. Watching his upright figure, Xianxia thought to herself, it seems Jiang Ping has truly reached his limit. For some reason, Xianxia stepped down and hugged Jiang Ping's waist, saying, "Senior brother Jiang, may you have a safe journey. I will definitely erect a tomb for you and visit you often." Upon hearing this, Jiang Ping shuddered. He only then realized that this girl thought he was on the verge of death. Jiang Ping pulled Xianxia into his embrace, saying, "Remember to come and cultivate with me every day from now on. By the way, you should establish your foundation here. This medicinal garden has abundant spiritual energy." Xianxia thought to herself that this old guy clearly was on the brink of death, but was still holding on. "Well, I won't expose you." However, she accepted Jiang Ping's suggestion. Oh, indeed, this place was suitable for her advancement. Xianxia dressed neatly and swallowed the foundation establishment pill, which dissolved immediately upon entering her mouth. Having been stuck at the 9th layer of Qi refinement for too long, with the help of the foundation establishment pill, her breakthrough was effortless, and she successfully advanced to become a foundation establishment disciple. Now she could enter the inner sect and cultivate the Tai Shanqing technique. Xianxia looked gratefully at Jiang Ping, who smiled faintly. Because during his dual cultivation with Xianxia, he also sensed the bottleneck at the 6th layer of Qi refinement. However, this thick-head fellow still had no idea how to break through and was completely stuck. He Qinghuan bid farewell to Jiang Ping, saying she needed to report to the inner sect and informed Jiang Ping that she might be busy with cultivation and wouldn't be able to visit him every day. But senior brother Jiang, rest assured, I He Qinghuan am yours in life and yours in death. Just then the system reminded him again the female protagonist's favorability has doubled, unlocking the new feature exchange. At this time Jiang Ping noticed that the system had notified him of having 1 point. He was confused about how this point was calculated. Jiang Ping flipped through the options, but nothing seemed appealing to him. What he wanted was longevity. Finally, he found that the exchange point for the Wanshou Dan required 2 points. But how was this point calculated? Unable to figure it out, he decided not to think about it. After all, he still had 50 years of lifespan left. The Yinyang Hall was a sect where female cultivators outnumbered male cultivators. As long as one wasn't as weak as Jiang Ping, who struggled to even lie down, any male disciple who entered the inner sect would have a dual cultivation partner. Jiang Ping stepped out of his room, sighing at how good it was to have lifespan. At that moment, 2 female disciples arrived at the medicinal garden. According to the rules, Jiang Ping, as an outer sect servant disciple, essentially a doorman of the medicinal garden, had to salute these 2 inner sect disciples. However, everyone in the sect knew that Jiang Ping had Lin Miaoyin backing him, who was the future sect leader, so no one wanted to offend Jiang Ping. Even if he acted a bit out of line, no one spoke up. At this moment, Jiang Ping suddenly thought that he should try to see if he could increase his favorability with these 2 female disciples. After greeting Jiang Ping, the 2 female disciples said, Senior brother Jiang, we are looking for 2 medicinal herbs that are 200 years old. Jiang Ping smiled widely, slapping his chest, which made him cough. This body truly was weak, and after a dry cough, he said, from now on, whenever you come to the medicinal garden, feel free to pick any herbs you want. If anything happens, I'll take the blame. Jiang Ping thought to himself that this was sincere enough. Oh, surely he had moved them, and his favorability should have increased. But he waited and waited, and the system showed no reaction. After a long time, there was still no response from the system. At this point, Jiang Ping became anxious and cursed in his heart, System, you bastard, can you please pay some attention? You either send me lewd publications or let me down at crucial moments. I will eventually be ruined by you. The 2 female disciples regarded Jiang Ping as a fool and indeed picked a lot of medicinal herbs. As they were leaving, they thanked Jiang Ping, but the system still had no reaction. Jiang Ping was truly at his wits' end this time. He had lost both the lady and the army. No way, the system must not let him down like this anymore. What kind of situation is this? Just as the 2 female disciples left, suddenly a beautiful woman appeared in the void, perfectly curvy, in all the right places. At that moment, Jiang Ping raised his eyes and saw that the visitor was none other than Shun Peiji, the head of the Yinyang. Jiang Ping was taken aback, pondering 20. What kind of reward can that give me? But the system fell silent. Jiang Ping was infuriated. He clearly remembered that when his favorability with He Qinghuan reached 50, the system rewarded him with a foundation establishment pill. This is impossible. How can I increase favorability with the headmaster? That's just ridiculous. This 20 must be a pity gift for someone on the verge of death like me. However, the one who was stunned next was not Jiang Ping, but Shun Peiji. She widened her eyes, puzzled. What is going on? Wasn't it said that I had only a year left to live? How suddenly do I have an extra 50 years? What kind of longevity herb did he consume? That's impossible. Shun Peiji was well aware of what was in the herb garden. Even if it were a pill, it wouldn't produce such an effect. Could it be the legendary celestial pill? Even more impossible. Why, I've never seen one. How could an old man on the brink of death obtain one? Shun Peiji steadied her mind and fixed her piercing gaze on Jiang Ping, exclaiming, Jiang Ping, what kind of sorcery have you employed to inexplicably gain 50 years of lifespan? I originally intended to take you to the back mountain of the Yinyang Palace as entrusted by Miao Yin to find a scenic spot for your final rest. It seems you deceived Miao Yin and I was kept in the dark. At this moment, Jiang Ping felt like an ant on a hot pan, anxiously pacing. He thought, how could I possibly discuss the system with you? Just then, the unreliable system chimed in again, reminding him favorability with the female lead 30. Jiang Ping nearly cried out, lamenting, what kind of situation is this? I originally had no connection with Shun Peiji, and raising her favorability was harder than reaching the heavens. Now I've fallen straight into an ice pit. Jiang Ping pondered, wondering if his constant cursing at the system had led it to deliberately trip him up. How could he be so unfortunate to encounter the second female lead, and the headmaster no less? At this moment, Jiang Ping looked up at Shun Peiji. Although she was slightly older, she was stunningly beautiful. So much so that voluptuous was the most fitting description. Shun Peiji felt uncomfortable under Jiang Ping's heated gaze, thinking, this isn't right. I came here to ask questions. Why is it that an outer disciple makes me feel so uneasy, especially since the hem of my skirt was inadvertently lifted by the breeze, causing this old man to stare at me like that? The next second, Jiang Ping felt a salty taste in his mouth. Upon touching it, he realized that blood from his nose had somehow trickled into his mouth. Shun Peiji frowned, cursing internally, what is this old pervert thinking? It was evident that Shun Peiji was becoming increasingly angry out of embarrassment, but for the sake of her disciple, she didn't want to argue with Jiang Ping. As for his lifespan, he still had 50 years left. By then Miao Yin would emerge from her seclusion and pass on the position of headmaster to her, letting them handle their affairs. With that thought, Shen Peiji tossed a jade bottle at Jiang Ping filled with red pills that Miao Yin had asked her to prepare during her retreat. Shen Peiji shook her head, thinking, what use are so many pills to someone on the verge of death? His mind is filled with filthy thoughts. Shen Peiji truly felt it was unworthy for her disciple and didn't want to pursue the matter further. She simply couldn't comprehend why this old man dared to stare at her so boldly, and she found herself feeling somewhat flustered. Shen Peiji turned to leave, leaving Jiang Ping to sigh heavily. Miao Yin, you've truly put me in a terrible situation. Why did it have to be you to send the red pills? Anyone else would have sufficed. It's not that I'm ashamed, but the system has included Shen Peiji in the task. What am I going to do? Jiang Ping was extremely frustrated, unsure if failing this task would lead to a new one. He had originally planned to make significant progress in improving his strength, but now he was back to square one, trapped by a single task. Jiang Ping thought about discussing with the system whether he could change tasks, but the system was notoriously fickle. He had just thought about cursing it when he remembered the difficulty of the task involving Shen Peiji and held back, fearing the system might throw him another curveball. At that moment, Jiang Ping had nothing to do and returned to his small room, sitting on the bed with closed eyes, contemplating if he could practice the initial stage of the He Huan technique alone. After all, he was striving for self-improvement. As a result, he sat on the bed for an entire afternoon, and to his surprise, he managed to break through to the 6th level of Qi refining. Not only did he achieve a breakthrough, but he felt that his strength and realm could continue to rise, which greatly exceeded his expectations. However, his body was simply too weak and his physical quality did not allow him to advance further. If he attempted to progress, his body would fall apart. The meridians responsible for circulating his spiritual power could not bear it, and Jiang Ping had no choice but to give up contemplating how to improve his physique. Without any tasks, dreaming of enhancement was futile. At that moment, Jiang Ping sensed some movement outside. It was almost dark. Who could be coming here? Ever since he broke through to the 6th level of Qi, refining his senses had become sharper. It was those two again, the two beautiful female disciples from earlier who had come to gather herbs. They didn't even greet him and directly proceeded to gather herbs. Jiang Ping wouldn't stand for it. He opened the door and shouted, "Put those down. Leave the herbs right there. Who gave you permission to collect them? Did you get my approval?" The two female disciples were taken aback, as Jiang Ping had clearly agreed they could gather herbs freely in the garden. But Jiang Ping didn't care about that and roared, "Drop them all. Get out." These two female disciples were far more skilled than Jiang Ping. If they wanted to kill him, 10 of him wouldn't be enough to handle it. But they didn't dare to act for the simple reason that this old man was backed by the future headmaster of the Yinyang Palace, Lin Miaoyin. The two female disciples threw down the herbs, fuming as they left the herb garden. One of them shot Jiang Ping a glare, her eyes seemingly wanting to devour him. Jiang Ping didn't care. Since they weren't targets, there was no way they could gather herbs. Not long after the two left, they returned, this time accompanied by a male disciple. This male disciple looked presentable. He clearly had over-practiced, as his walking posture was reminiscent of Jiang Ping's previous state, though he was not as shaky. The three of them entered the herb garden again. Jiang Ping couldn't discern this male disciple's strength, but he knew he was much stronger than himself and was definitely not someone he could provoke. As the male disciple entered, he pointed at Jiang Ping and said, "Bring me the medicinal materials needed by my two Dao companions." Jiang Ping raised an eyebrow, cursing inwardly, "What a delusion. This medicinal garden is the betrothal gift on my path of growth. You think you can just ask for herbs with a mere lip service? You're seeking my life." Regardless of the youth's strength, Jiang Ping shouted, "Get lost, all of you." The young man was taken aback by Jiang Ping's harsh words. He thought to himself, "My father is an elder of the Yinyang Palace. How dare this trash, a mere outer disciple guarding the medicinal garden, insult me? If I don't kill him today, how will I maintain my standing in the Yinyang Palace? How will the two beauties beside me see me?" Without saying another word, he threw a powerful punch towards Jiang Ping's chest. That punch was beyond Jiang Ping's ability to withstand. He flew out like a kite with a broken string, crashing heavily to the ground, spewing blood with two ribs broken. The young man spat on the ground. "Waste, you're nothing but a waste." At this moment, the two female disciples walked over to the young man, and he wrapped an arm around one of them, saying, "Darling, go and kill him for me." The two female disciples replied, "Let's just teach him a lesson. He has Lin Miaoyin backing him." "Lin Miaoyin, how shall eventually be trampled by me. You two go collect herbs, they take as many as you want." At this point, Jiang Ping could no longer hold on. His body seemed ready to fall apart, his vision darkened, and he fainted. After the three left, it suddenly began to rain from the sky, instantly waking the unconscious Jiang Ping. Jiang Ping lay on the ground, unable to move, feeling as if his body had been disassembled. Just then a graceful figure appeared in the medicinal garden. It was He Qinghuan. Upon seeing Jiang Ping in the medicinal garden, He Qinghuan's first reaction was this old fool is done for. I said he was returning to his prime after consuming an entire bottle of red pills. Even a great Luo Golden Immortal wouldn't dare to consume them like that. Is he really willing to risk his life just to vent his beastly desires on me? Looks like he won't survive the night. He Qinghuan mainly saw the blood on the ground and thought it was due to an intense internal struggle. Just then Jiang Ping's throat emitted a hoarse voice, "Help me." He Qinghuan hurriedly helped Jiang Ping up, thinking that as a husband and wife share a bond, she should fulfill her duty as a companion in his final moments. He Qinghuan didn't mind the mud on Jiang Ping's body. She had just joined the inner sect today and had taken on a master. She planned to serve Jiang Ping well tonight, but instead she encountered this situation. He Qinghuan helped Jiang Ping into the house. Jiang Ping lay on the bed, breathing rapidly with little air left. How could he endure a punch from someone of a much higher realm? His already broken body was dealt a fatal blow by that punch. Jiang Ping was acutely aware that he wouldn't survive for 3 days. But now, apart from the red pills, he had no other elixirs. Consuming the red pills would only worsen his injuries, providing no benefit whatsoever. The only person he could think of who might save his worthless life was Shen Peizhi. Perhaps she would spare him due to Lin Miaoyan's influence. Jiang Ping clutched He Qinghuan's jade hand tightly, not knowing where he found such strength, causing He Qinghuan to feel pain. Jiang Ping, risking his life to speak, felt as if every word he uttered was draining his lifespan. "Qinghuan, I beg you for a favor. Now that you are an inner sect disciple, you can meet the sect leader." Coincidentally, He Qinghuan had just received her token after joining the inner sect today. She said nothing, listening to Jiang Ping while continuously patting his chest. However, as she patted, she felt something was wrong. Why is he so severely injured? Did he suffer backlash from the red pills? No, this is from a beating. He Qinghuan couldn't fathom who in the sect would dare to lay a hand on him. At this moment, she became anxious, not understanding why she was so concerned about this old man, as if she truly cared for him. Jiang Ping weakly said, "You must find the sect leader and tell her that I'm on the verge of death, begging her to come to the medicinal garden to save me." He Qinghuan understood. If someone else made this request, she would certainly scoff at it. An outer disciple, a mere servant guarding the medicinal garden, asking the sect leader to come save him. Was he out of his mind? But since Jiang Ping said so, He Qinghuan believed it, because of her connection with Lin Miaoyan. "Senior brother Jiang, you must hold on. I'm going right now." He Qinghuan didn't waste a second, rushing straight to the living quarters of the inner sect leader. Although she was now an inner sect disciple, meeting the sect leader was still like climbing to the heavens, especially at night, when she had to pass through several checkpoints. After passing the inspections, just as she was about to see Shen Peizhi, she encountered the final checkpoint, 2 personal female disciples serving Shen Peizhi, who told He Qinghuan the sect leader is resting, you can wait until tomorrow to see her. The 2 female disciples didn't care much about that, tomorrow was fine. He Qinghuan couldn't see her, but Jiang Ping was still struggling for his life. Not knowing where she found the courage, she yelled at the top of her lungs outside the main hall, "Sect leader, help. Jiang Ping is dying." Her loud shout startled Shen Peizhi. With her cultivation, she could sense even the slightest movement, let alone someone shouting outside. Shen Peizhi thought, wait a minute, didn't he still have 50 years of lifespan left? How could he be on the brink of death? This was wrong. That old fool must have consumed all those red pills at once. Was he in conflict with some female disciple and ended up killing himself? This old fool was too disappointing. Shen Peizhi initially didn't want to interfere, but thinking of her precious disciple and fearing her disciple would blame her for not helping upon coming out of seclusion, she sighed, what a misfortune. With a flash, she appeared outside. At this moment, He Qinghuan had already been subdued by the 2 female disciples and was about to be handed over to the law enforcement hall. Shen Peizhi intervened, asking, "Who are you? What happened to Jiang Ping?" He Qinghuan didn't care about her own dignity anymore. She thought of nothing else, saving him was the priority. She originally didn't want to mention her connection with Jiang Ping out of shame, fearing being pointed at by the disciples. But thinking of Jiang Ping's condition, she looked at Shen Peizhi and said, "I am senior brother Jiang's Dao companion. He has been severely injured and is on the verge of death. I beg the sect leader to save him. Senior brother Jiang sent me to find you, saying only you can save his life." "What did you say?" Shen Peizhi's mind was in a whirl. She suddenly heard several pieces of news and couldn't process it all. Jiang Ping was actually sparring with someone. This girl was actually Jiang Ping's dual cultivation partner. Shen Peizhi scrutinized He Qinghuan from top to bottom, thinking this shouldn't be. Is this girl blind? He Qinghuan was a foundation establishment cultivator. How could she take a liking to a dying man, especially one utterly useless and old? Now Shen Peizhi's mind was a complete mess. She also thought of Jiang Ping's suddenly increased lifespan and directly grabbed He Qinghuan, flying towards the medicinal garden. Shen Peizhi was a perfected nascent soul cultivator, and in just a few breaths she arrived at the medicinal garden. Upon entering the room, Shen Peizhi immediately noticed where Jiang Ping was injured. This injury was not a significant matter for her, but the environment of the medicinal garden was not conducive to his recovery. Thinking of her poor disciple's request before his seclusion, Shenpeiji ignored He Qinghuan and directly took Jiangping away. Jiangping in a daze looked at Shenpeiji and also noticed He Qinghuan, who was sweating profusely. He even gestured toward He Qinghuan with his lips. He Qinghuan observed this clearly and thought to herself, what time is it? And he's still thinking about that. At that moment, Jiangping intentionally or unintentionally wrapped his arms around Shenpeizi's slender waist. Shenpeiji felt as if she had been electrocuted, nearly falling out of the air. Where is this old fool's hand going? I really want to throw him down, but seeing that he's on the verge of death, forget it. Let's consider it a penance for my disciple. Just as Jiangping was feeling faint, a sudden system prompt echoed Jiangping's favorability level. Is it? At this moment, Jiangping felt as if he had come back to life. His excitement caused his hands, which were holding Shenpeiji, to tremble. This time the system rewarded him with a xianxia dan, and it wasn't just an additional 50 years of life, but a full 100 years. 100 years. Adding it up makes for 150 years. Enough, definitely enough. This time I truly turned misfortune into a blessing. This punch wasn't taken in vain, it granted me 100 years of life. How wonderful. At this point he became even more agitated. Shenpeiji had no idea what was wrong with this old man, but Jiangping's hands kept rubbing against her, making her feel a bit lightheaded. She had never experienced such a strange sensation before, which overwhelmed her mind, making her feel slightly breathless and confused. At that moment the old man became even less restrained. Normally it would take only a few breaths to return to his grand hall, but Shenpeiji flew for a considerable time. Shenpeiji had never felt this way before, as surprisingly, she found herself somewhat enjoying being embraced by this old man. What is happening to me? Jiangping, now a little more awake, looked down and was nearly scared to death. Why are we flying so high? His emotions suddenly surged and his movements became somewhat uncontrolled as his hand accidentally brushed against Shenpeizi's shoulder. Shenpeiji was caught off guard by the touch and instinctively let out a gasp, her whole body trembling as if touched by a slight electric current. In that moment she felt as if she had been struck by the bone-softening palm technique, her body going weak as she instinctively let go of Jiangping. Thankfully she quickly reacted in this critical moment and caught Jiangping, or else if he had not been killed his life would have ended here tonight. Shenpeiji hurriedly took Jiangping to her room. At this time her heart raced and she didn't know what was wrong with her. That feeling earlier had captivated her. Did this old man cast some kind of spell on me? In fact, it wasn't surprising for Shenpeiji to think this way, as she also possessed a water spirit body, though not as pure as Lin Maoyan's, and without a dual cultivation partner, everything that happened earlier made her heart flutter. However, this flutter of hers inadvertently benefited Jiangping, filling his favorability level to a full 100. Jiangping was dumbfounded. Having just received the xianxia dan, what else was going to be given to him now? The system directly rewarded him with a cultivation technique, He Huan Gong. Upon seeing these three characters, Jiangping felt that the system's rewards were always somewhat inappropriate. Didn't it just reward him with an identical technique last time? Could it be that this time it's the mantra and not the illustrations? Then he was rewarded with a flying sword, and Jiangping felt that this sword was definitely not ordinary. But the system's reminders weren't over yet, it also rewarded him with a point. Jiangping was so excited that he nearly forgot about his injury and jumped up. With 2 points he could exchange for another xianxia dan. However, Jiangping was not in a hurry to redeem it. He already had 150 years. Points were too important, he needed to use them wisely. Now was not the time to ponder these matters. Jiangping lay on the bed and Shenpeiji looked at him shyly. It was only then that Jiangping noticed something was off, pondering to himself, what's with that expression on her face? Could it be that she has been captivated by my extraordinary charm? Just as Jiangping was reveling in his pride, he suddenly felt a sharp pain at his wound, unable to suppress a cry of ouch. Shenpeiji snapped back to her senses and scolded, "You're injured like this, and yet you're still daydreaming." Saying this, she prepared to heal Jiangping's wounds. At this moment, Jiangping dared not be too presumptuous, hastily flattering, "With the great master personally healing my wounds, I reckon this injury will heal in the blink of an eye." Shenpeiji rolled her eyes at him, her hands beginning to gather spiritual power as beams of light entered Jiangping's body. In an instant, Jiangping felt a continuous surge of vitality spreading throughout his limbs and bones, and his breathing gradually began to recover. At this moment, Jiangping looked at Shenpeiji and saw beads of fine sweat forming on her forehead, with one droplet gently sliding down her smooth, rounded face. Jiangping's Adam's apple involuntarily rolled, and he swallowed hard. At this moment, Shenpeiji also felt something was amiss. She quickly covered her chest with her hand, inwardly cursing, "This old man shows me no respect at all, always looking at me like a hungry wolf. It's utterly unbearable." Shenpeiji glared at Jiangping fiercely. Her heart began to doubt. How could I be getting worked up over a mere disciple? Why can't I even get angry? It felt as if all these years as the sect leader were for nothing, if she had failed to establish any authority. She glared at Jiang Ping again and scolded, "You old lecher, if you keep looking around like that I might really throw you out." At this point Jiang Ping could not help but swallow again. He didn't know where he found the courage, but he suddenly said to Shin Peiji, "Great master, you are truly beautiful. I simply can't help myself." As soon as these words left his mouth, it was as if a thunderclap had exploded in Shin Peizi's ears. She believed that while her looks might not be unparalleled in the world, she was still quite remarkable. However, in pursuit of higher cultivation methods and awakening her water spirit body, she had long cast aside matters of romantic affection. At this moment, someone had so bluntly confessed to her, instantly stirring ripples in her long-sealed heart. Shin Peiji felt she could not continue entangling with Jiang Ping on this topic. She reached out, pinched Jiang Ping's chin, and tossed a pill into his mouth. Then she lightly swayed her dress and gave Jiang Ping a mesmerizing view from behind, turning gracefully to leave no longer paying attention to him. At this moment, Jiang Ping gazed at Shin Peizi's somewhat lonely figure, his mind swirling with thoughts. He was a traveler from another world. Although he hadn't personally experienced romantic encounters, he had seen plenty. Instantly, he sensed the emptiness in Shin Peizi's heart. At this moment, Jiang Ping came up with a bold idea. He felt that this might be the time when Shin Peiji most needed companionship and comfort. Even if he could heal his injuries in a short time, Jiang Ping did not wish to leave. He clearly remembered that after increasing his favorability level with He Qinghuan, he unlocked a new function: exchange. Jiang Ping thought to himself, if he could win over such a stunning beauty, would he unlock another new feature for him? No, I absolutely must not recover too quickly. He intended to use this time spent with Shin Peiji to peel away the layers of her long-sealed heart, like an onion, to melt her heart and help her completely let go of her grudges. If it comes to the worst, I can just swallow the entire bottle of red pills and have a you die I live situation with I must say Jiang Ping is truly daring. If the male disciples of the sect knew about his thoughts, they would probably worship him, bowing down to him every day. He is Jiang Ping among men, a role model for us all. However, Jiang Ping also adorned his boldness with a particularly grandiose reason, all for his future cultivation. Shin Peiji had just used her internal energy, carefully mending Jiang Ping's broken rib. Jiang Ping lay there, suddenly feeling a surge of determination, as if he had made a resolute decision. He put forth all his strength, summoning every ounce of energy to deliver a powerful punch to his own chest. Jiang Ping was not particularly strong, but he was nonetheless at the 6th level of the Qi refinement stage. The consequences of this punch were unimaginable. In an instant, it felt as though his chest had been struck by a heavy object, collapsing immediately. Alas, he had struck too hard and ended up knocking himself unconscious. One must admit Jiang Ping was quite ruthless, willing to resort to all manner of strange tricks to win Shin Peizi's favor. He spared no effort. Shin Peiji had not gone far, and she clearly heard the commotion from inside the room. Thinking that something serious had occurred, she swiftly returned. Seeing Jiang Ping's pitiful state truly shocked her. If he exerted any more force, he would surely start bleeding from all 7 orifices. He was already bleeding from 3. Shin Peiji was genuinely frightened and hurriedly examined Jiang Ping's condition. With her keen eyesight, she immediately recognized that this was self-inflicted. She couldn't help but wonder, what on earth is this guy doing? Has he suffered some humiliation and lost the will to live? But wait, earlier it was clear that this old fellow had a thick skin, thicker than the sole of a shoe. What could possibly be going on? However, looking at Jiang Ping's appearance, Shin Peizi's heart couldn't help but tremble. Despite the wrinkles on his face, one could still vaguely see that he was quite handsome in his youth. Shin Peiji extended her fingers again, gently pressing on Jiang Ping's injured chest. At that moment, Jiang Ping seemed to have fallen into a long dream. In the dream, images of practicing martial arts together and discussing techniques with Shin Peiji continuously surfaced in his mind. While in his sleep, he restlessly murmured her name, Peiji. Shin Peiji had already been stirred by Jiang Ping's previous words and actions. Now, with his current state, her already fragile psychological defenses crumbled. Moreover, Shin Peiji could tell that Jiang Ping was indeed in a deep sleep and not pretending. At this moment, Jiang Ping called out Peiji, and his hand instinctively moved, firmly grasping Shin Peizi's delicate hand and pressing it tightly against his chest. Shin Peizi's body softened slightly, unintentionally leaning towards Jiang Ping. In a moment of carelessness, her lips brushed against his. This sudden contact startled Shin Peiji, her heart racing like a frightened rabbit, as if it might leap from her. At this moment, Shin Peiji prayed fervently that this old man wouldn't wake up. Coincidentally, at this critical juncture, Jiang Ping stirred awake. As he opened his eyes, his gaze was completely drawn to Shin Peiji, leaving no room for anything else. He thought he was still dreaming and mused, since this is a dream, why should I be afraid? Regardless of who was before him, even if it were a celestial maiden, he would engage her in a deep discussion of martial arts to enhance his strength. With this in mind, Jiang Ping exerted his strength and tightly embraced Shin Peiji. Though Shin Peiji possessed a perfected nascent soul cultivation, she was momentarily flustered, the strange sensation nearly disorienting her. For a moment, she was at a loss, lacking the will to resist, even deep down not wanting to oppose Jiang Ping. Jiang Ping believed this to be a dream, thinking that only in a dream would Shen Peiji be so compliant. Perhaps only in a dream could she willingly practice together with him. At this moment, Jiang Ping completely let go. He took out a bottle of red pills and swallowed them all at once, thinking, whatever ill seized this opportunity in the dream to enhance my power. Then Jiang Ping began to guide Shen Peiji to circulate their spiritual energy according to a specific technique. He first demonstrated the most basic Huan skill, as he was currently unable to practice intermediate techniques. But then he thought cultivating alongside someone of higher cultivation would greatly benefit his own strength. Thus Jiang Ping steeled himself and decided to risk trying the intermediate Huan skill. He concentrated, slowly channeling his relatively weak spiritual energy into Shen Peizi's body according to the meridian path. Initially, Shen Peiji did not understand his intentions, wondering, could it be that this old man cares for me, wanting to help me refine my spiritual energy in this manner? To think he could be so considerate. Whatever, at least I haven't wasted my time with him. However, in the next moment, Shen Peiji sensed something was amiss. Despite Jiang Ping's feeble spiritual energy, once it entered her body, it followed a unique meridian path, triggering a resonance with the spiritual energy within Shen Peiji. Shen Peizi's expression grew increasingly dazed, as before her stood not the old man she knew, but the beloved figure she had longed to cultivate and progress with. As Shen Peizi's vast spiritual energy circulated through her meridians, it surged back into Jiang Ping's body, creating quite a commotion. The moment the overwhelming spiritual energy entered Jiang Ping's body, his narrow meridians nearly ruptured under the force. Yet Jiang Ping gritted his teeth, holding on desperately, thinking, I must endure. This may be the opportunity to change my destiny, the key to my survival in this world. At this moment, Jiang Ping's mind recalled being struck away in the medicine garden, remembering the moments of being bullied and trampled upon. His anger and resentment could no longer be suppressed, and he let out a powerful roar. Just then, Shen Peizi's surging power poured into Jiang Ping without reservation. In pain, he couldn't help but bite down on Shen Peizi's fair shoulder. Shen Peiji let out a soft gasp, yet in the midst of pain, she felt an indescribable and wondrous sensation, as though the spiritual energy within her was being refined and unleashed in a unique manner. However, Shen Peizi's strength far surpassed Jiang Ping's. Under this powerful force, Jiang Ping's realm shattered like an eggshell, and the previously fragile barrier of the 7th level of qi refinement was breached. Not only that, he began to frantically absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth around him, striving to consolidate this hard-won breakthrough. They say women are made of water. Coupled with Shen Peizi's water spirit body, their cultivation together was like sailing smoothly on water, achieving remarkable results. At this moment, Shen Peiji transferred her internal spiritual power to Jiang Ping, feeling a pang of heartache for his frail body. To be honest, Jiang Ping was quite impressive. As long as he could endure the 8th layer of the qi refinement stage, he could enter it at any time. It was no longer a barrier, but merely a thin layer of paper. All of this credit was due to the risks he took while practicing the intermediate stage of the Huan Gong, but the main reason was still Shen Peizi's immense strength. Imagine the benefits of a qi refinement cultivator dual cultivating with a fully realized nascent soul expert. At this moment, Jiang Ping lay weakly on Shen Peiji, gazing at her beneath him. He weakly said, Peiji, I love you so much. If only this weren't a dream, I could stay by your side forever. But then I would wake up and you would leave. I really want to lie in your arms like this, never to part again. Shen Peiji was this old fellow really thinking he was dreaming? Did he think he could have his way without taking responsibility? Shen Peiji didn't know what to say. Could she shamelessly say, no, you have to take responsibility for me? After all, she was the headmaster of the Yinyang Hall. Could she be as shameless as him and say such things? A tear trickled down her eye as she cursed in her heart, men are all heartless, take everything and deny it. Jiang Ping was not denying anything. He wished he could acknowledge such things multiple times, but he had no option. When Jiang Ping saw the tear in Shen Peizi's eye, he immediately kissed away her tears, saying, Peiji, you are so beautiful. Are you feeling sad? I truly wish I could stay by your side forever, but I'm so afraid that once I wake up you will send me back to the medicine garden. If I return to the medicine garden, I will never see you again, and we will have no connection forever. No, you absolutely must not heal me. If you fix my body, I will be the first to run back to the medicine garden. No, I need to make my injuries worse. Even if I can't have you, just seeing your back every day would make me happy. What woman could resist such a confession? Even change descending to the mortal realm would be easily fooled by. Shen Peiji didn't expect that his injuries were to stay by her side, and she was moved to tears. At this moment, she was completely melted by Jiang Ping tightly hugging him and whispering in his ear, I want. At that time, Jiang Ping gently kissed her forehead and lay quietly beside her, thinking to himself, a dream of 1,000 autumns, a dream of 1,000 autumns. However, as he lay there, he felt something was off, as if a pair of beautiful eyes had been staring at him, causing Jiang Ping to feel uneasy. What was going on? This dream seemed to be lasting a bit too long. Perhaps he should wake up, or at worst he could disable himself every day to stay here. Just as Jiang Ping was lost in thought, Shen Peiji kicked him in the backside, causing him to tumble off the bed. After hitting the ground, he quickly stood up, glaring at Shen Peiji, and said, "I usually don't dare to act against you out of respect, but in a dream, don't forget you are my woman, you already." When he said "you already," he suddenly felt something was amiss. Suddenly Jiang Ping felt as if he had been struck by lightning and instinctively pinched himself on the waist, which hurt terribly. This wasn't a dream. Could it be that she really? At this moment Jiang Ping's mind was in chaos, unable to distinguish what was happening. He kept rubbing his head and glanced at his body. When he discovered that he had indeed advanced to the 7th layer of the Qi refinement stage, he instantly realized that the situation was dire. She wouldn't kill me to silence me, would she? I'm just a small fry. Moreover, I said so much to her, even biting her and bullying her, as she wouldn't take revenge on me, would she? At this moment a drop of sweat slid down Jiang Ping's forehead and fell on the floor, making a crisp sound. Shen Peiji watched everything, smiled slightly, and said, "Is this all you've got? What happened to your bravado earlier on the bed? It turns out you're just a soft-shelled shrimp who can only talk big. You're not capable at all." Jiang Ping was afraid of being told he was incapable. He immediately stood up and said, "Where am I not capable? Didn't you just see how I was earlier?" His words made Shen Peiji blush deeply. However, the next second the system's delayed love reminded him again that since the female lead's favorability had doubled and was still increasing, a new function search had been unlocked. To be honest, Jiang Ping didn't know what this function was. He wanted to get closer to the system, but the system ignored him. Now was not the time to explore new functions. The most important thing was to appease this lady. If he could handle this soft rice, well, he could walk sideways in the Yin-Yang Hall. Previously, he relied on Lin Maoyan's protection, and now he had the sect master covering him. He had to find a way to take revenge and find that guy. Jiang Ping thought that this revenge had to be taken care of by himself. Having Shen Peiji help him take revenge was meaningless and might affect his mindset. If others heard Jiang Ping's current thoughts, they would probably laugh their teeth out. A small fry in the Qi refinement stage, what kind of Dao heart does he have? Jiang Ping shamelessly approached Shen Peiji and became bold, pulling her into his embrace. He didn't bother explaining anything to Shen Peiji, feeling that explanations were useless. The simplest, most direct and effective method was action. He sealed Shen Peizi's lips again with a kiss which dispelled her doubts and opened their hearts to each other. This kiss could be said to have sealed their fates, ensuring they would never be apart again. What worldly matters or others' gazes? After this kiss, to hell with all that. Shen Peiji was both shy and angry from Jiang Ping's sudden kiss. She gently pushed him away, playfully scolding, "You bad egg, you're getting bolder." "I'm not able to control myself," Jiang Ping chuckled. Shen Peiji glared at him and said, "Humph, you must not do this again in the future, otherwise I won't spare you." Jiang Ping quickly nodded like a well-behaved child. At that moment, a loud commotion came from outside the door. "Oh no! Oh no! Something big has happened." Shen Peiji frowned, adjusted her clothes, and said, "You stay here, I'll go take a look." As she stepped out of the door, she saw a disciple rushing over in a panic. "Master, something's wrong. A disciple of the Yin-Yang Hall killed a disciple of the Blood Demon sect, and the Blood Demon sect's leader Shui Wuhan has come to demand an explanation from you." Shen Peizi's expression darkened as she let out a cold snort. "Humph, this Shui Wuhan is simply too arrogant." Before her words fell, her figure darted like lightning towards the palace entrance. Inside the room, Jiang Ping couldn't just sit still. He stealthily followed her outside. Jiang Ping's mind was clear. He knew that the strength of the Blood Demon sect was somewhat superior to that of the Yin-Yang Palace. The key point was that the Blood Demon sect had more male disciples, and as soon as the female disciples of the Yin-Yang Palace were alone, accidents were bound to occur. The male disciples of the Blood Demon sect loitered outside the Yin-Yang Palace like wolves, eyeing the female disciples with predatory intent. Thus, there was a strict rule in the Yin-Yang Palace that female disciples were absolutely forbidden from going out alone. However, in terms of overall strength, the two sides were roughly equal. Especially Shen Peiji, who was a full-fledged nascent soul cultivator of the water spirit body, while Shui Wuhan was merely at the mid-nascent soul stage. In terms of high-end combat power, the Yin-Yang Palace clearly had the upper hand over the Blood Demon sect. Therefore, when Shen Peiji heard this news, her heart was filled with doubts. Where did this Shui Wuhan get the courage, daring to come to the Yin-Yang Palace to seek revenge? Even if the Yin-Yang Palace had killed disciples of the Blood Demon sect, he should have swallowed this bitter loss in silence, not to mention that he might be plotting some underhanded revenge against the Yin-Yang Palace, and it was impossible for him to come here so brazenly. Something unusual must be happening. Could it be that Shui Wuhan has advanced to the late nascent soul stage? Or has he taken some powerful pill, daring to come here so arrogantly to provoke us? Just then, Jiang Ping quietly slipped out of the main hall and coincidentally bumped into He Qinghuan. It turned out that He Qinghuan had been waiting outside Shen Peizi's residence to gather information about Jiang Ping. She didn't know what was going on, even she couldn't understand it, but she was worried about Jiang Ping, the old guy. She was truly afraid that he would kick the bucket. After all, she had become an inner sect disciple largely thanks to Jiang Ping. He had given her that precious elixir without keeping any for himself. So He Qinghuan didn't care at all about the blood demon sect coming to their door. If the sky were to fall, there would be someone tall to hold it up, but Jiang Ping was the only one of his kind in the world. If he were gone, what would she do? Unknowingly, Jiang Ping had become her support. It's somewhat amusing to think about how she could pin her future on it. When He Qinghuan saw Jiang Ping, her eyes immediately lit up. Jiang Xixiang, are you all right? Jiang Ping grinned, revealing a big white smile. Of course I'm fine. Not only am I fine, but my strength has also broken through to the 7th layer of qi refinement. I'm currently riding high on the winds of fortune. As he spoke, Jiang Ping grabbed He Qinghuan and started walking outside. At that moment, He Qinghuan's eyes were dazed, and the moment Jiang Ping held her hand, she felt a deep sense of security. Once upon a time, when she saw Jiang Ping, she felt nothing but disgust and disdain. When did she start feeling this sense of security? She herself was puzzled and racked her brain, but couldn't figure out when Jiang Ping's image in her heart had subtly. When Jiang Ping and He Qinghuan arrived at the mountain gate, they saw Shen Peizhi and Xue Wuhan standing in the void, confronting each other from afar. Xue Wuhan, though not very old, was dressed in a red robe and carried a large sword on his shoulder. Just by looking at that sword, one could tell it was heavy and required tremendous strength to wield. Given Jiang Ping's current frail body, he couldn't even lift it. At this moment, Shen Peizhi was pondering. She wondered why Xue Wuhan had not broken through in realm, yet what on earth had given him the audacity to come to the Yinyang Palace to cause trouble. At that moment, Xue Wuhan gazed at the beautiful Shen Peizhi and laughed heartily. I didn't expect that sect leader Shen has become even more stunning than a celestial being. I wonder if sect leader Shen would be willing to become my dual cultivation partner. If so, my blood demon sect will immediately merge with the Yinyang Palace, which would be a grand event for the entire cultivation world. What do you think, sect leader Shen? Shen Peizhi found it strange. No matter what Jiang Ping did to her, she felt quite pleased. However, upon hearing Xue Yuan's outrageous words, she was immediately filled with rage. Today she must teach this scoundrel Xue Wuhan a lesson, and even if it meant killing him on the spot, it wouldn't quell her anger. These two didn't even mention discussing compensation or accountability for the disciples of the blood demon sect killed by the Yinyang Palace. It was clear they were just looking for trouble. Seeing Shen Peizhi about to strike, Xue Yuan's expression darkened. You foul woman, you're overstepping your bounds. Today I will let you experience the power of my blood demon blade at its peak. Don't think that just because you are in the late nascent soul stage, I can't handle you. Once you're dead, the female disciples of the Yinyang Palace will be at the mercy of my blood demon sect disciples. I heard that the next sect leader of the Yinyang Palace is also of the water spirit body. Oh, at that time, I will take both you and your disciple into my harem to serve me well. While saying this, Shen Peizhi was already so furious that her eyes turned red. Today she must beat Xue Wuhan to the point where even his mother wouldn't recognize him. What blood demon blade? Shen Peizhi didn't take it seriously. She directly summoned a long sword in her hand, twirled her wrist, and created a beautiful sword flower before sending a beam of sword light slashing towards Xue Wuhan. Xue Wuhan, unfazed, stepped forward, blocking with the large sword in front of him, instantly releasing a blazing red aura from the blade. Shen Peizhi's sword light struck the red aura and was instantly swallowed, not even creating a splash. Shen Peizhi furrowed her brow in surprise. Could the power of the blood demon blade at its peak truly be this terrifying? Meanwhile, Jiang Ping below was already so furious he felt like he would explode. Hearing Xue Yuan's foul words, he wished he could rush up and beat him until his head popped out from his backside. The two women Xue Wuhan mentioned were both close to his heart. He Qinghuan, standing beside him, also sensed Jiang Ping's inner fury. She thought Lin Miaoyin has some connection to him, so she could somewhat convince herself. But the sect leader had only saved his life, and that was for Lin Miaoyin's sake. What special relationship did Shen Peizhi have with him to warrant such agitation? At this moment, He Qinghuan hadn't even realized she was feeling irrationally jealous. You foul woman, is that all the ability you have? Xue Wuhan shouted loudly. Without further ado, he gripped the large sword tightly with both hands and swung it down fiercely like a mighty strike, splitting Mount Hua, sending a massive red sword light shooting out, carrying endless violent power straight towards Shen Peizhi. Jiang Ping's heart was in his throat, but at the same time Shen Peizhi did not retreat at all. She simply waved her sleeve lightly, and suddenly a raging tide surged in front of her. The surging sea instantly enveloped Shen Peizhi completely, and the sword light struck fiercely upon the waves, but was immediately absorbed by the soft yet resilient force of the waves. This is far from over. Shen Peizhi once again lightly shook her sleeves and waved towards Xue Wuhan. In an instant, the waves before Xue Wuhan surged higher and higher, each wave faster than the last, crashing down upon him like an overwhelming tide. Seeing this, Xue Wuhan gripped his knife with one hand and slashed fiercely at the waves, the powerful blade aura instantly splitting the waves in two, dissipating into mist in the air. At that moment, Shunpeiji continuously changed her hand seals, chanting incantations. The sky suddenly darkened with dense clouds, and what had been a clear day turned into an oppressive silence, as if the entire world was plunged into lifeless stillness. Immediately, a massive vortex appeared in the void. At the moment the vortex materialized, a sharp sword tip shot out from its center. Within the vortex, a colossal sword gradually emerged, overshadowing the sky. As the great sword appeared, the very heavens and earth were pressured to the brink of collapse by its overwhelming might. At this moment, Jiang Ping, upon seeing this great sword, felt as if he could hardly lift his head. Although King Huan's strength surpassed his own, her state was no different from Jiang Ping's. It was no wonder that Qing Huan felt this way. The disparity in realms between her and Shunpeiji was far too great. Jiang Ping could only feel his old limbs threatening to crumble under the pressure. Shui Wuhan laughed maniacally, his voice seeming to pierce the heavens. Shunpeiji, do you think such trivial means can defeat me? As he spoke, the red robe on his body billowed as if caught in an invisible tempest. An extremely evil aura erupted from his body like a volcanic eruption. He tightly gripped his great knife, chanting incantations as the red flames upon the blade surged like a tidal wave, transforming into an enormous skull. The skull's eye sockets glimmered with a bizarre red light, its massive jaws opened wide, lunging ferociously at the great sword. Boom! The two collided violently like the collapse of heaven and earth, producing an ear-splitting roar. This immensely powerful shockwave caused the surrounding space to visibly distort, as if the very fabric of space were being torn apart. Jiang Ping and Qing Huan were directly flung away by this overwhelming force like kites, with cut strings crashing heavily to the ground. Jiang Ping, already heavily injured, could hardly withstand the terrifying fluctuations produced by the battle of the nascent soul cultivators. In an instant, he felt a sweetness in his throat and spat out a mouthful of blood, his face turning as pale as paper. Qing Huan hurriedly helped him up, urgently, saying, "Senior brother Jiang, this is not a place for us to be. We must However, Jiang Ping was exceptionally stubborn, refusing to leave, determined to remain. At this moment, he did not even understand what was happening to him, his heart hanging in his throat, each beat laden with profound worry, fearing that even the slightest mishap would befall Shunpeiji. At this time, the battle between Shunpeiji and Shui Wuhan had escalated to a life-and-death struggle. Shui Wuhan's body was surrounded by a circle of small red skulls spinning around him, and then he charged towards Shunpeiji as if he had gone mad. Shunpeiji wielded her long sword and engaged Shui Wuhan in combat. The powerful fluctuations of spiritual energy flattened several surrounding peaks. The disciples watching from the side were terrified and hurriedly retreated. Jiang Ping was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan, struggling to approach the battlefield, while Qing Huan quickly pulled him back, saying, "Jiang Ping, don't be foolish and go to your death. Our abilities can't help in this situation." Jiang Ping clutched his chest, his eyes fixed on the battle above, barely able to muster the strength to walk. Yet Jiang Ping couldn't help but wonder why Shui Wuhan seemed to be fighting like he was on a drug, becoming increasingly ferocious, thinking, has this guy eaten a whole basket of red pills? How can he unleash such formidable power? So fierce. Although Shunpei's realm was higher, female cultivators generally lacked the raw strength of male cultivators. Moreover, Shunpeiji had also realized that Shui Wuhan must have used some secret technique or consumed forbidden pills to unleash this potential. However, this power was extremely sinister and tyrannical. Shunpeiji understood that such power must have its drawbacks. As long as she could endure, Shui Wuhan was bound to meet his end. But at this moment, Shui Wuhan showed no signs of giving Shunpeiji a breather. His great knife swung with fierce wind, countless blade shadows enveloping Shunpeiji, leaving her only with the ability to defend, completely unable to fight back. Though Jiang Ping was weak, he could see that Shunpeiji was in a dire situation. For reasons unknown, he was now risking his life. Ignoring his injuries and feeling himself aging further, Jiang Ping pulled out a Wanshou Dan and swallowed it in front of Qing Huan. Qing Huan didn't recognize the Wanshou Dan and had no idea what precious pill Jiang Ping had consumed. At the moment Jiang Ping swallowed the pill, his vitality visibly surged back. Most importantly, his appearance began to change, no longer looking so decrepit, his skin gradually becoming smoother. What surprised Qing Huan the most was that she actually smelled a foul odor. This sensation was familiar to her. It was what happened when a cultivator in the qi refining stage drew spiritual energy into their body, purging impurities during the process. At this moment, Jiang Ping, who was already on the brink of breaking through, instantly broke through to the 8th level of the qi refining stage. He couldn't care less about stabilizing his realm. His appearance and vitality were still changing, yet he had no time to consider these matters. Qing Huan was now in a daze, thinking, is this still the old man I knew? How did his looks change so dramatically? At this moment, a flying sword suddenly appeared in Jiang Ping's hand, manifesting so quietly that even Qing Huan didn't realize where it had come from. She knew that Jiang Ping had no storage bags or rings on him. He Qinghuan quickly grabbed Jiang Ping's hand, fearing that in a moment of impulse he would rush out to fight, shouting, Jiang Ping, that is a nascent soul cultivator. A single sneeze from them could kill you. What do you think you're doing? Jiang Ping allowed He Qinghuan to hold him, not resisting. At this time, Shui Wuhan leaped high into the air, his great knife raised above his head, as a massive spiritual figure suddenly appeared behind him, towering over him by more than 10 times. Moreover, this figure wielded an enormous knife that looked just like Shui Wuhan's. Shui Wuhan shouted at the top of his lungs, die. Xin Peizhi was not to be underestimated. The moment that figure appeared, she positioned her sword before her chest, swiftly transforming her hand seals and continuously channeling spiritual energy into the sword in front of her. In an instant, the sword before Xin Peizhi transformed from 1 to 2, then from 2 to 4, and in the blink of an eye, over 100 identical swords appeared. Xin Peizhi pointed at Shui Wuhan, and at that moment, all the flying swords shot toward him. During this process, all the flying swords continuously combined and transformed, instantly forming a massive sword that surged forward with unstoppable momentum towards the figure behind Shui Wuhan. At this moment, the red and blue spiritual energies collided in the void. Xin Peizhi realized that this was likely Shui Wuhan's strongest strike. As long as she could endure it, he would be left with no fighting capability. However, Shui Wuhan's strike was far too powerful, and she could see her combined great sword being forced back by his overwhelming aura. Yet Xin Peizhi was a late-stage nascent soul cultivator. She was determined, infusing the great sword with wave after wave of spiritual energy. Shui Wuhan shouted again, "You filthy woman, die for me," and then madly infused his great blade with spiritual energy. In that split second, a thin crack appeared in the great sword Xin Peizhi had summoned. In the blink of an eye, the sword was covered in a web-like pattern of cracks, and with a loud crack, it shattered into pieces. Xin Peizhi's breath was unstable, and she kept retreating. Shui Wuhan, however, showed no signs of stopping, bringing his great blade down towards her head. At this moment, Jiang Ping steeled his heart and thought, Tongzi, good, all depends on you now. Let's see if the flying sword you rewarded me can be of any use. If it works, I will definitely treat you like a dear grandfather in the future. Brother trusts you this time. You must help me block that great blade. With that, Jiang Ping threw the flying sword he held. The sword transformed into a streak of light, capturing everyone's attention on the battlefield, leaving no one to care about a minor character. The flying sword suddenly collided with the great blade, leaving Xin Peizhi dumbfounded. She glanced at Jiang Ping out of the corner of her eye. He grinned, then slowly closed his eyes, as he had almost exhausted all his strength when throwing the sword. At that moment, He Qinghuan hurriedly supported Jiang Ping and quickly moved him away from the scene. Xin Peizhi's head was buzzing as she thought, was that him just now? However, there was no time to ponder this. The great blade was intercepted by the flying sword, but just a few breaths later the flying sword was sent flying. However, Xin Peizhi seized the opportunity to catch her breath. She was right, this was Shui Wuhan's strongest strike. Seeing that this attack had failed, Shui Wuhan's aura instantly weakened, and he turned to flee. Xin Peizhi could not allow him to escape so easily. Is the Yin-Yang Palace a place you can enter and leave at will? She produced another long sword and thrust it toward the back of Shui Wuhan. Now it was too late for Shui Wuhan to dodge. He swung his great blade back, but he was already a spent force and could not withstand Xin Peizhi's strike. Moreover, his blade was not as agile as a sword. Before his blade could swing at Xin Peizhi, her sword had already pierced into his back. Fortunately, Shui Wuhan managed to turn slightly, otherwise his heart would have been pierced and this body would have been ruined. At this moment, the elders he brought rushed over to catch him. Seeing this, Xin Peizhi realized that there would be no opportunity to slay Shui Wuhan today. If she insisted on keeping him, it would surely lead to mutual destruction. She did not want the Yin-Yang Palace to fall into such a predicament. Moreover, Shui Wuhan had sustained heavy injuries this time and had taken forbidden drugs. The Blood Demon sect would likely remain quiet for a while. When Jiang Ping threw that flying sword, many had witnessed it, especially the high-ranking figures from the Yin-Yang Palace and the Blood Demon sect. They all saw that it was actually a Qi refinement stage cultivator at the 7th or 8th level who had saved Xin Peizhi's life, and none of them could believe it. Especially the people from the Blood Demon sect who thought Jiang Ping was hiding his cultivation, but those from the Yin-Yang Palace knew clearly that he was just a useless person, a dying man. Xin Peizhi looked at the retreating figures of the Blood Demon sect members and restrained her impulse to slaughter. She reached out to pick up the flying sword that had blocked that fatal strike, but to her surprise the sword showed no response. When she got closer, she found that the flying sword had vanished without a trace. Xin Peizhi couldn't help but gasp, muttering to herself, "Why is this flying sword so sentient? I would never have guessed that this treasure was thrown out by that old man." Xin Peizhi suddenly felt the need to reevaluate Jiang Ping. He was not as useless as she had imagined. Most importantly, Jiang Ping's reckless bravery earlier had significantly elevated Xin Peizhi's perception. At this moment, it could be said that Xin Peizhi had completely fallen into the charm of Jiang Ping's world, Perhaps she would live the rest of her life for this man, and it was for an old man at that. Xianxia glanced at the disciples and elders of the Yin Palace behind her, saying, "Remember this, if from today on no one is allowed to descend the mountain without permission. Everyone must behave themselves. If you can't stand it, you'll have to endure it. Also strengthen defenses and be wary of a counterattack from the Blood Demon sect. Everyone disperse." With that, Xianxia flickered and vanished. She was now intent on finding Jiang Ping. Earlier she had seen clearly that He Qinghuan had helped Jiang Ping away and he had already fainted. Xianxia inwardly complained, "That old man, why is he stirring up trouble? Women are just soft-hearted despite their sharp tongues." She had been moved to tears by Jiang Ping's earlier actions, but was now scolding him for acting recklessly. To be honest, Jiang Ping was indeed reckless. What business did an old man in the Qi refinement stage at the 8th level have in a battle between nascent soul cultivators? A mere sneeze could kill him. Soon enough, Xianxia pinpointed the locations of Jiang Ping and He Qinghuan. It turned out He Qinghuan had taken Jiang Ping to the medicinal garden. Upon seeing Xianxia arrive, He Qinghuan hurriedly bowed respectfully. Xianxia nodded slightly, thinking, How can I allow Jiang Ping to rest here?" Then she waved her hand, lifting Jiang Ping like a chick, and in an instant they disappeared from the medicinal garden. He Qinghuan's mind was racing. She realized that Jiang Ping's relationship with the sect leader seemed a bit A woman's intuition is quite sharp. This feeling did not stem from Lin Miaoying being Shun Paizi's disciple, but from Shun Paizi's earlier gaze, which was filled with the tenderness of a wife looking at her husband. He Qinghuan stood still, gazing in the direction where the two figures had disappeared, her heart a tumult of mixed emotions. She bit her lip and muttered to herself, "Could it be that by cultivating with this old man I've stumbled upon a treasure?" Suddenly, He Qinghuan felt as if she had struck a great bargain. Of following this old man didn't seem too much. Meanwhile, Xianxia brought Jiang Ping to her dormitory, gently tossing him onto the bed. Looking at the unconscious Jiang Ping, Xianxia sighed in resignation. Jiang Ping's internal spiritual energy was utterly depleted. What surprised Xianxia the most was that he had previously been just a 7th-layer Qi refining cultivator, yet now he seemed to have reached 80%. It is known that cultivation is like rowing upstream. Even the most talented disciples cannot hope to break through to the 8th layer of Qi refining within a month. He had always been injured and was in no condition to break through. Xianxia lightly pressed her fingers on Jiang Ping's heart, a soothing power gradually infusing his body. She dared not exert too much force, fearing she might rupture this old man's frail meridians. However, what astonished Xianxia was not his breakthrough in cultivation, but rather the lifespan she observed in Jiang. Previously, she suspected that Jiang Ping had inexplicably gained 50 years of lifespan. Although she hadn't examined closely how much lifespan he truly had, her disciple Lin Miaoying would never joke about such matters. But now Jiang Ping had not merely gained 50 years, he had directly acquired 150 years. This left Xianxia utterly baffled, unable to explain it. Although Jiang Ping's appearance still bore signs of age, it must be said that his skin was significantly smoother than before, with a hint of elasticity, no longer shriveled, but instead brimming with vitality. At this moment, Xianxia felt that Jiang Ping's body was filled with infinite possibilities. Even though this old man had consumed a small bottle of red pills during their dual cultivation, Xianxia felt that those pills seemed merely a decorative touch, having little effect. He already possessed considerable power on his own. All of this combined raised Xianxia's curiosity about Jiang Ping to its peak. While she had never disliked her relationship with him, after all, she was the head of the Yin Palace, and coupled with her striking appearance, to think that someone who wanted to cultivate with her would be a person on the brink of death with such low strength, if others were to find out, they would surely gossip behind her back. But at this moment, Xianxia felt that Jiang Ping was indeed a rare find. Jiang Ping lay on the bed, feeling his Buddhist self-healing abilities rising rapidly. Coupled with the spiritual energy that Xianxia had infused earlier, his parched body was instantly revitalized. Jiang Ping gradually came to his senses, looking at Xianxia sitting beside him, and smiled, sheepishly revealing a grin he believed would charm her. Upon seeing that smile, Xianxia immediately knew that this old rascal was up to no good again. However, rather than feeling repulsed, she even found herself harboring a tiny bit of anticipation. Xianxia rolled her eyes at Jiang Ping, playfully scolding, "You old lecher, waking up and already acting improper." Jiang Ping chuckled and replied, "I can't be serious in front of you." Xianxia gently tapped Jiang Ping's head, saying, "You're quite the smooth talker. But consider yourself lucky this time. Don't act so recklessly next time." Jiang Ping sat up, grasping Xianxia's hand, and said, "Don't worry, you'll be more careful in the future." Xianxia withdrew her hand and said, "Stop with the flattery, you need to rest well. He'll go prepare something to eat for you." With that, Xianxia turned and left the room. Jiang Ping watched her departing figure, feeling quite pleased with himself. Shortly after, Xianxia returned with a steaming bowl of spirit porridge. "Eat this while it's hot. I made it myself," Xianxia said. Jiang Ping, catching the enticing aroma, couldn't wait to dig in. Slow down, don't choke, Shinpeiji laughed watching him. Jiang Ping was merely a chi refining cultivator, now only slightly stronger than an ordinary person, and he hadn't yet reached the level of fasting. Without a golden core, how could he avoid consuming grains? Experts like Shinpeiji didn't need to eat. They could sustain themselves solely by absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. As Jiang Ping devoured the food, he couldn't help but murmur, "Oh my, this dish made by my wife is simply delicious." Shinpeizi's face flushed like a ripe apple at his words, nearly dripping with water. She pouted, saying, "Who is your wife? Don't call me that randomly." Jiang Ping blinked, "Innocently, aren't you?" Shinpeiji realized that Jiang Ping's shamelessness exceeded even the thickest walls. At that moment, Shinpeiji recalled something and looked at Jiang Ping, asking, "What was that flying sword you threw out?" Jiang Ping's eyes darted around as he replied, "I just found this thing near our herb garden. I thought it was interesting, so I kept it around. How would I know it was so powerful?" Shinpeiji did not believe this old man's nonsense. As a minor chi refining cultivator, even if he wielded a divine weapon, he wouldn't be able to unleash any real power. The fact that the flying sword could withstand Shui Wuhan for nearly a breath of time was not something Jiang Ping could achieve. Rather, the flying sword had its own consciousness and could fight independently. Shinpeiji, being who she was, certainly understood the key to this matter. However, she did not press further and simply told Jiang Ping, "You must keep that flying sword safe. Many people are now aware you possess such a treasure, and there will surely be those who covet it. Moreover, you saved me." As she spoke about being saved, Shinpeizi's eyes turned red. Who was Jiang Ping? Would he let such a good opportunity slip away? He threw his bowl aside and pulled Shinpeiji into his embrace. At that moment, Shinpeiji needed comfort. Jiang Ping instantly kissed away the tears from the corner of Shinpeizi's eyes, then captured her lips. This was quite a turn of events. What had initially been a scene of Shinpeiji worrying about Jiang Ping suddenly became fiery. Jiang Ping's hands were not idle either, reaching directly under Shinpeizi's skirt. As Shinpeiji attempted to rise, Jiang Ping would not give her the chance. Shinpeiji exclaimed, "It's broad daylight." Jiang Ping dismissed her concerns, shouting, "What does day or night matter?" Seeing she couldn't argue with him and her body felt electrified, Shinpeiji simply waved her hand and lowered the curtains. One could only say practice makes perfect. Jiang Ping embraced Shinpeiji as if he were a greedy child clutching his favorite candy, murmuring, "My dear, don't hide. Let's enjoy some intimacy today." Shinpeiji felt both shy and angry, struggling to say, "You shameless old man, can't you see what time it is?" Jiang Ping, unfazed, chuckled, "Who cares about the time? A moment of spring night is worth 1,000 gold pieces." Shinpeiji felt both shy and angry as she struggled to say, "You shameless old man, don't you see what time it is?" Jiang Ping, however, paid no mind, chuckling, "What does the time matter? A moment of spring night is worth 1,000 gold. Shinpeiji couldn't help but feel both exasperated and amused, saying, "You're such a talkative fellow, I truly have no way to deal with you." While Jiang Ping was being playful, he continued to tease, "Darling, just yield to me, and I guarantee you'll feel like you're in heaven." Unable to restrain herself, Shinpeiji punched him, saying, "You're so irresponsible, all you do is talk nonsense." Jiang Ping took the chance to grab her hand and kissed it, saying, "Hey, don't hit me. Hitting is affection, scolding is love." In the midst of their playful banter, the atmosphere became increasingly intimate. Jiang Ping's breath quickened and his tone was filled with urgency. "My dear, I truly can't hold back any longer." Shinpeizi's cheeks flushed slightly as she feigned annoyance, saying, "You're always so impatient, can't you take it slow?" At that moment, Jiang Ping's emotions surged within him like a raging tide, unable to be suppressed any longer. He seemed to be immersed in a situation of extreme desire, becoming extraordinarily excited, akin to a starving beast discovering its prey, rushing towards Shinpeiji without a second thought. Before long, Jiang Ping's voice, filled with astonishment, echoed in the room. "Your understanding in this aspect is quite impressive." Shinpeiji, both annoyed and amused, scolded, "Can't you keep your voice down? Aren't you afraid someone will hear?" Jiang Ping, however, was unfazed. "What's there to fear? Let them envy us." He panted heavily, beads of sweat forming on his forehead and slowly sliding down his cheeks. He made an effort to adjust his breathing and activated the unique practice method of the Hahuan skill once more. Previously, he had practiced this with Shinpeiji, and the feedback had been remarkable. As they say, practice makes perfect. Jiang Ping transferred his spiritual energy into Shinpeizi's body once again. This energy followed the pathway of her meridians, creating a cycle within her body before returning to Jiang Ping. At this moment, Jiang Ping's breath surged upward. He could clearly feel the barrier of the 9th layer of chi refinement. As long as he wanted to break through, it would be a matter of minutes. Moreover, he realized that his meridians could withstand the impact of the 9th layer of chi refinement. However, Jiang Ping still held back, thinking that breaking through continuously might harm him. Until now, he hadn't practiced any cultivation methods, only charging forward without restraint. He feared that a rapid breakthrough might cause significant trouble for himself. Furthermore, if he continued breaking through like this, he would manage, but Shun Peiji would be bewildered, and she would certainly question his secrets. Jiang Ping gritted his teeth, suppressing the urge to break through, and lay leisurely beside Shin Peiji. Their familiarity with each other was growing. At that moment, Shin Peiji looked incredibly charming and shot Jiang Ping a glance, saying, "Look at you, is this all you can do?" Jiang Ping quickly smiled apologetically. "Madam, you are absolutely right. Next time, I will definitely be even more impressive." Ignoring him, Shun Peiji quickly put on her clothes and got out of bed, thinking, as the headmaster of the Yinyang Hall, I can't be seen constantly lingering with this old man during the day. Ever since becoming close with this old man had I not become a debauched and tyrannical ruler. However, as soon as Shun Peiji got out of bed, she felt something was off with her body. What was going on? She felt a mysterious force nourishing every meridian in her body. Even the hidden dangers left from her battle with Shui Wuhan had completely healed. She never expected that cultivating with this old man would have such miraculous effects. In fact, Jiang Ping himself was also unaware that this was the wonderful outcome of the Hahuan skill, which served as a significant reward for Shun Peiji. Shun Peiji, unsure why, turned back to glance at Jiang Ping, who was lying on the bed, and said, "Just stay here honestly, and don't go anywhere." Jiang Ping, upon hearing this, thought to himself, "What the heck does she want to keep me like a caged bird? How can that be? A man should aspire to explore the world. How could I be trapped in your gentle embrace every day?" Although Jiang Ping thought this, he dared not say it aloud. Firstly, he feared Shin Peiji would be unhappy, which was not his principle. Secondly, being with Shun Peiji felt safe. There were surely many people in the sect who were keeping an eye on him, and as an outer sect servant, he truly couldn't protect these secrets. At this moment, he regretted whether saving Shin Peiji that day was right or wrong. Perhaps she could have handled that blow herself. Jiang Ping scolded himself, thinking, what was he thinking? For the sake of his woman, risking his life was worth it. I, Jiang Ping, am such a loyal and righteous person. After Shin Peiji left, Jiang Ping swiftly got dressed and prepared for the multitude of tasks ahead. He still hadn't thoroughly pondered the rewards he received earlier along with the newly emerged abilities. He quickly began to examine his rewards earnestly. Thinking that he had been awarded another volume of the Hahuan skill, a surge of excitement bubbled up within him, contemplating, I bet this time the master won't be so dull and will give me an illustrated version. Jiang Ping eagerly opened the second volume of the Hahuan skill, and his head buzzed as he realized it was indeed illustrated. However, when he took a closer look at the illustrations, he discovered something unusual. He was originally a time traveler and had seen a cultivation method in a novel that could harness the power within others for one's own use. The second volume of the Hahuan skill awarded to him stated that if a woman were injured or poisoned facing life-threatening situations, Jiang Ping could use the method of dual cultivation to transfer her injuries along the pathway of spiritual energy to himself, and this power would nourish his own strength without causing him any harm. Jiang Ping excitedly continued flipping through, and it was all about how to dual cultivate in various poses and methods when encountering dangers. He became so thrilled that he unconsciously bled from his nose. Coincidentally, at that moment, Shin Peiji walked back in. Seeing Jiang Ping's appearance, her brows furrowed, as if she could crush a fly, thinking to herself, this guy wouldn't be self-harming again to seek sympathy, trying to stay by my side, would he? Didn't I already tell him to stay here and not go anywhere? Doesn't that imply I agree to him staying by my side? Why is he self-harming then? Jiang Ping, fearing Shin Peiji would see the book in his hand, quickly hid it away. Shin Peiji didn't take much notice. However, Shin Peiji felt quite pleased inside, thinking, it seems my beauty and charm have completely ensnared this old fellow. He is determined not to leave me. If Shin Peiji knew that Jiang Ping was in this state because he was looking at the illustrations, she would probably drag him off the bed and give him a good beating. Shin Peiji let out a light hum and said, quickly, wipe that nosebleed clean. What do you look like? As she spoke, her face showed no sign of anger, completely behaving like a spoiled child. Jiang Ping coughed a few times quickly, trying to find a way to conceal his embarrassment. Jiang Ping got out of bed, knowing in his heart that Shin Peiji kept him here for his own good, but staying here was indeed inconvenient. Moreover, he had a pile of matters to attend to outside. Jiang Ping looked at Shin Peiji and grasped her delicate hand, saying, Peiji, I want to return to the medicinal garden. Shin Peiji widened her eyes at Jiang Ping, thinking to herself, wasn't this guy always wanting to stay here? Were those previous words just for show? Seeing Shun Peitz's expression, Jiang Ping immediately knew she was overthinking. He hurriedly said, you are the head of the Yinyang Palace. It wouldn't be proper for me to stay here all the time. Returning to the medicinal garden would allow me to gather some spiritual herbs and medicines for cultivation, and as a mere servant disciple, staying here would inevitably lead other disciples to speculate. Shin Peiji truly did not expect that Jiang Ping's intentions were all for her benefit. In truth, Shin Peiji did not care about those worldly perceptions. She was just waiting for Lin Miaoyin to finish her closed-door training and advance to the nascent soul stage, at which point she would pass the position of head to her. Then she could roam freely with Jiang Ping, going wherever she pleased, unrestrained and unbound. To be honest, Shin Peiji used to place great importance on the position of the head, but ever since she became close to Jiang Ping, she felt it was just a burden. Shin Peiji, being a reasonable person, took out a communication jade token and handed it to Jiang Ping, saying, "Then go and cultivate well in the medicinal garden." Then she turned her wrist and took out a jade vial, handing it to Jiang Ping. "This is a foundation establishment pill. As long as you succeed in foundation establishment, you can enter the inner door and cultivate the superior martial art, the Tai Xianxia." After saying this, Shin Peiji disregarded everything and directly pointed at Jiang Ping's forehead, the cultivation secret of the Tai Xianxia instantly drilling into his mind. At that moment, Jiang Ping felt a sensation that was difficult to describe. Shin Peizi's complete and unreserved dedication to him was especially evident with that foundation establishment pill. Although Jiang Ping did not care much in the Yinyang Palace, that pill was truly a treasure among treasures. Shin Peiji gave it to him without a second thought, not caring whether she could advance to foundation establishment herself. Shin Peiji then said, "Go ahead, and if anything happens, use the communication jade token to inform me immediately." Jiang Ping nodded and left Shin Peizi's room. To be honest, Shin Peiji felt a bit disappointed, but her heart was warm. Throughout her life, she had never encountered someone like Jiang Ping, who was so considerate of her feelings, always thinking from her perspective and taking care of her in every way. At this moment, Jiang Ping felt like a fish returning to the ocean, finally able to return to his own territory. He knew that returning to the medicinal garden would certainly bring some trouble, but he was not worried at all, thinking the blood demon sect couldn't possibly swagger in boldly. He needed to quickly figure out the new functionality he had gained, specifically what this search feature could actually find. He had to understand it. Since he had gained lifespan and could cultivate, he must make himself stronger. Only then would others dare not. Whenever Jiang Ping thought of the youth who injured him at the medicinal garden, anger surged within him. Wasn't it just because he had an elder for a father? He had the sect master's wife. If he dared to provoke him again, he would let him taste the flying sword in his hands. Jiang Ping returned to the medicinal garden, and everything was as usual. He swiftly sat cross-legged in the room and activated the second skill awakened by the system. He pondered, needing to clarify what this search function truly was. Upon opening it, a map suddenly popped up. The map displayed two types of colored dots, one red and one blue. To his surprise, there were only 2 red dots, while the remaining were scattered blue dots. At this moment, Jiang Ping began to contemplate what these red and blue dots meant based on his current location. Suddenly, he discovered the trick behind it. Moving towards the 2 red dots based on his position, the uppermost red, that was clearly where Shin Peiji the head resided, while the other red was the inner door of the sect, where He Qingwan was located. It seemed that in the future he could know the whereabouts of his woman at any time. This function was marvelous. But what did these blue dots signify? Could they possibly be the other female leads he needed to find? Jiang Ping looked closely and noticed that there was only one blue dot within the sect, while the others seemed to have ventured outside the Yinyang Palace's range, and quite far away at that. This was not good news. With his current strength at the 8th level of Qi refinement, going out to train would just mean becoming cannon fodder for others, barely able to protect his own life. The only weapon he had was that flying sword. Yet to this day, he still did not know how much power that flying sword could wield in his hands. Previously, when he saved Shin Peiji, he threw the flying sword, and all the spiritual energy within him was drained completely. He was left with only a single strike's worth of strength. If 2 opponents came at him, wouldn't he become fish on the chopping board, ready to be slaughtered? Therefore, thinking about leaving the Yinyang Palace to venture out was simply impossible. It seemed he had to quickly find a way to establish his foundation. There was still a blue dot in the Yinyang Palace. Oh, what location could that be? Jiang Ping thought back and forth, but it seemed there was no such place in his memory. Suddenly, he seemed to recall something. Could it be where Lin Miaoyin was in closed-door training? Forget it, he knew Shin Peiji would definitely not allow him to meet Lin Miaoyin. That closed-door training was indeed a deadlock. She would not come out unless she broke through to the nascent soul stage. It seemed this clue had to be abandoned. Jiang Ping shook his head helplessly and muttered to himself, "It looks like everything has to be pondered slowly, considering the long term." Now Jiang Ping began to explore the exchange function in the system. He currently had 2 points and wanted to see what he could exchange for. Now that he had the foundation establishment pill, it was time to find a cultivation method. He glanced at the Tai Xianxia given by Shin Peiji and found it utterly unimpressive. This technique was completely contrary to Jiang Ping's current mindset, or more accurately, it was against the system. No wonder Shin Peiji, nearing 100 years old, attained the pinnacle of the nascent soul stage, while still maintaining her virginity. It was all because of this Tai Xianxia. The further one practiced this technique, the less it required dual cultivation, which was indeed favorable for Jiang Ping. However, for him this technique was utterly useless, and he tossed it aside. Jiang Ping opened the section for cultivation methods in the exchange function and nearly jumped up in frustration. Damn it, this system is so unreliable. What harmony sword, harmony blade, harmony steps? Ooh, every cultivation method had the prefix harmony attached. At this moment, Jiang Ping felt his head had grown larger. Was it possible that right when he was being intimate with his beloved woman about to reach the climax, he would suddenly jump out of bed to practice swordsmanship? Just thinking about it made him wonder if he had lost his mind. He truly couldn't stand it. Moreover, he saw that the points required for the exchange were not low. The cheapest harmony sword required 3 points. Jiang Ping felt a severe headache and directly withdrew his consciousness from the system, muttering, "I really can't deal with this." Jiang Ping felt utterly helpless, internally lamenting that this system had reached new heights of absurdity. However, Jiang Ping dared not lose his temper with the system, fearing it might throw him some bizarre tasks that were impossible to complete. At this moment, the only thing he could and must do was to quickly devise a way to establish his foundation. As long as he succeeded in this, he could at least elevate his status as an outer disciple. After all he had traversed into this world, he still had to maintain some dignity and strive for progress. Once he became stronger, what kind of beauties would he not be able to attract? With increased strength, his impression on the ladies would also rise, making it easier to gain their favor. Well, since there wasn't a woman around him now, he would just have to cultivate the Hahuan skill alone. Jiang Ping was becoming increasingly familiar with the circulation route of the acupoints around his body, and his cultivation speed was soaring as if he were on a rocket. Unfortunately, while his consciousness could propel the spiritual energy within him to circulate rapidly, his body could not withstand it. By the 5th cycle, Jiang Ping was drenched in sweat, feeling as if he had just been pulled from the water. His body simply could not endure such high-intensity exertion. At this moment, Jiang Ping felt his vision darken, and a foul odor was incessantly invading his nostrils. He was starting to understand the essence of cultivation. These were the impurities expelled from his body after circulating the spiritual energy to refine his physique. His old body, while not lacking in age, was indeed filled with a mountain of impurities. He hurriedly sought a place to wash up. After all, he was no longer an old man. He still had a lifespan of at least 150 years. Just as he prepared to get off the ground, he had exerted himself too much during cultivation and lost his balance, falling to the ground with a thud, causing him to grimace in pain and exclaim, "Ouch, my old back." At that moment, Jiang Ping noticed the tree branch propped up by the door and pondered, "Am I really unable to rid myself of this crutch habit?" But at this point, he truly could not do without it. With no other choice, Jiang Ping crawled to the door, and as he grasped the tree branch, he felt a surge of confidence, as if his soul had returned to its rightful place and his body regained strength. Jiang Ping stood up, leaning on the tree branch as he made his way towards the back. Why the back? Because there was a small river there where he used to enjoy fishing to pass the time and occasionally bathe. However, ever since he could cultivate, the frequency of his baths had skyrocketed. Jiang Ping staggered towards the riverbank, resembling a drunken man. At this moment, a disciple in the distance had been observing the situation. This disciple was puzzled, thinking something is off. Did the elder make a mistake in judgment? Why am I keeping an eye on a dying man? What treasure could he possibly have? If he does, I could just grab it directly. Why go through all this trouble? Meanwhile, in another location, 2 or 3 disciples were also watching Jiang Ping, and one of them reminded the others, "Hurry back to report to the elder. Just say this old thing won't last long. He walks with his legs apart like he's been castrated." Jiang Ping, with his lowly strength, knew nothing of this. If he could hear what that disciple just said, he would probably risk his life to contest it, exclaiming, "Your whole family has been castrated. This insult is too blatant." Jiang Ping was exerting all his strength to finally reach the riverbank. If the river had been even a tiny bit farther, he definitely wouldn't have made it. Just as Jiang Ping reached the riverbank, he casually threw away his crutch, but then lost his balance and fell headfirst into the river with a splash. The disciples, observing Jiang Ping from the sidelines, were stunned, their eyes nearly popping out of their heads as they hurried to pull out their communication jade slips, exclaiming, "Elder, bad news. That old thing has jumped into the river to commit suicide." "What? Stop wasting breath. Hurry and fish him out. The flying sword hasn't been retrieved yet." Suddenly, figures from all directions rushed towards the riverbank. When these people arrived at the riverbank, they looked at each other, all recognizing one another and knowing precisely why. It turned out that there was not just one group targeting Jiang Ping. Now all the attention was focused on him. At this moment, Jiang Ping was splashing around in the water, having swallowed several mouthfuls of it. The icy river water made his legs tremble, and he could hardly stand. The disciples also understood that their only task now was to quickly rescue him. A group of them rushed over, nearly tearing Jiang Ping apart in their eagerness, with some grabbing his hair, others pulling his arms, and some hugging his head, grabbing any part they could. Jiang Ping shouted at the top of his lungs, "Damn it, you're grabbing the wrong thing." No, not there. He was on the verge of. At that moment, one oblivious disciple joked with Jiang Ping, "Old man, that thing of yours is useless now, it's okay." That comment nearly sent Jiang Ping into a fit of rage. That was the lifeblood of his growth. How could it be useless? His future happy life depended on it. Jiang Ping looked at the disciples before him, and he had roughly guessed what Shen Peiji had already warned him to be cautious. It seemed he had revealed his treasure, and so many people were up. Jiang Ping also realized that these guys were disciples under the elders, likely sent by the elders to monitor. Jiang Ping pondered that his days would not be peaceful moving forward. Oh, at the very least someone would be watching. However, Jiang Ping was not foolish. He understood that he was currently safe. In the future, no one would dare to openly confront him. It was precisely because the flying sword had not been taken away that these people didn't dare to act against him, at least not openly. Who didn't know he saved Shen Peiji? Even if they had 100 guts, they wouldn't dare to confront him directly. As for whether they would secretly do something, Jiang Ping was in the dark and knew nothing of it. At that moment, one disciple fixed his gaze on Jiang Ping and said, "Senior brother Jiang, what are you doing? Why did you jump into the river to commit suicide? Has someone bullied you in the sect? Speak to me, and I will help you teach them a lesson. Even if I can't handle it, I will report to the elder, and the elder will definitely uphold justice. Our Yinyang Hall has always acted fairly, and will never allow you, Senior Brother Jiang, to suffer any grievance. Moreover, Senior Brother Jiang, you stood up to save her when the sect master was in trouble. You are a model for all disciples of the Yinyang Hall. You must not lose hope." A group of people were chattering away, almost leaving Jiang Ping completely bewildered. It turned out that these folks thought he had jumped into the river to end his life. It seems my earlier appearance indeed left them quite confused. However, this little scene was rather good. At least now I know that so many people are secretly concerned about me. At this moment, Jiang Ping hurriedly explained, "I just wanted to take a bath." The disciples looked at each other and suddenly burst into laughter. "Stop messing around, Senior Brother Jiang. The way you looked earlier was clearly that of someone who is fed up with life." Jiang Ping realized that he could not clarify the situation now. Forget it, what else could he say to this bunch? Better to just keep quiet. At this moment, Jiang Ping prepared to walk back to the river. He tried to stand up, but ended up stepping on a pebble, slipping, and fell hard onto his backside. Jiang Ping helplessly shouted, "Help me." Instantly, more than 10 hands reached out, almost pulling his arm off, making Jiang Ping wince in pain. However, he still wanted to continue towards the river, but the disciples would not let Jiang Ping go down again. They simply lifted him up and carried him back to the herbal garden. At this moment, Jiang Ping was utterly despondent, feeling as if he wanted to die. Once upon a time, he had such special treatment, surrounded by people, as if he were a protected species. At this time, several elders concealed in the void observed Jiang Ping, their minds swirling with strange thoughts. Wait, isn't he supposed to be a dying man? How come his lifespan has increased? The disciples did not dare to leave the herbal garden, fearing Jiang Ping might do something reckless again. But the elders in the void quickly ordered their disciples to withdraw. "What are you doing here? Stay in the shadows and continue observing." After bidding farewell to Jiang Ping, the disciples did not forget to remind him, "Senior Brother Jiang, you must hold on and take care of yourself." At this point, Jiang Ping truly felt a lack of confidence in wanting to live and a lack of determination in wanting to die. Jiang Ping sat in the courtyard without moving. Suddenly, a figure rushed towards the herbal garden, and upon hearing the footsteps, Jiang Ping knew it was He Qinghuan. The first thing He Qinghuan did upon entering the herbal garden was to scrutinize Jiang Ping from head to toe. "Are you all right? What happened to you today? Why is there a rumor in the sect that you jumped into the river to end your life? I rushed here as soon as I heard this news. Did you encounter some trouble?" Jiang Ping, looking speechless, replied, "Qinghuan, let's go. Help me take a bath." He Qinghuan's eyes widened in shock. "No way, you still want to." Although He Qinghuan initially aimed to gain benefits for her own cultivation, Jiang Ping understood that her attitude towards him was gradually changing, and thus his attitude towards her had also shifted. "No, I just want you to take me to wash." He Qinghuan thought to herself, "Fine with me around, he can't possibly die," and then followed Jiang Ping back towards the river. Some unthinking disciples suddenly chimed in. Are they too going to commit double suicide? Should we report? The other disciples nearly kicked this one away. Such a beautiful girl, and she's more powerful than that old man. A double suicide. Have you been kicked by a donkey? That disciple murmured, "You just kicked me." As Jiang Ping entered the river, He Qinghuan followed him in. Jiang Ping smiled, faintly revealing what he thought was an enchanting smile. He Qinghuan immediately knew that this old fellow was up to no good, thinking to herself, "Why does he always have such thoughts?" However, recalling the heroic moment when Jiang Ping threw his flying sword that day, He Qinghuan's gaze, she realized that the longer she interacted with this old fellow, the more different he was from the other disciples. Although he was a bit naughty, he was loyal, and sometimes particularly brave. However, Jiang Ping would definitely not do anything out of line towards He Qinghuan now. He was well aware of how many eyes were secretly watching them, and how could he possibly give these people a live broadcast? Once Jiang Ping was clean, He Qinghuan noticed that this old fellow was more pleasant to the eye than before, looking even a tad handsome. At that moment, those male disciples around couldn't help but snicker to themselves. Are those two going to make something happen in the river? Tomorrow, the entire Yinyang Hall will surely be in an uproar. I wonder what exactly that girl sees in this old man to become Jiang Ping's partner. He Qinghuan is a foundation establishment disciple. What status does Jiang Ping have? Could it be At this point, all the disciples had a thought. Then He-Ching-Huan must be acting on someone else's orders. She must also be here to seize treasures from Jiang Ping. Oh no, what hope do we have left? This matter must be reported to the elders quickly so they can decide. Jiang Ping and He-Ching-Huan had no idea about the small calculations and movements in the hearts of those disciples. He-Ching-Huan helped Jiang Ping back to the room, and the two began to chat idly. Jiang Ping asked He-Ching-Huan how her cultivation in the inner sect was going, and as He-Ching-Huan grew more familiar with Jiang Ping, she was unafraid to speak her mind. Now she was complaining to Jiang Ping, the sect only told me the entry mantra for the Tai Shanqing Ju, and the rest will only be revealed slowly after 5 years. What good does knowing just the mantra do? Jiang Ping sighed. He knew that cultivating this technique would not benefit his woman, as she would maintain her maiden status like Shen Peizhi and Lin Miaoying. However, thinking it over, it was fine. This girl had already established a marital bond with him, so even if she cultivated the Tai Shanqing Ju, it wouldn't be a big deal. At this moment, Jiang Ping looked at He-Ching-Huan and pointed at her forehead, directly transmitting the complete Tai Shanqing Ju to her. After He-Ching-Huan digested this thought, she jumped up 3 feet high in joy, pondering he, a mere outer sect disciple managing the herbal garden, actually knows such profound techniques from the Yin-Yang Hall. It seems this technique must have been taught to him by Lin Miaoying. No, perhaps it was given by the sect leader. That makes sense. He-Ching-Huan thought of this and stopped pondering further, which is the cleverness of women. She only needed to know that Jiang Ping had her in his heart, and there was no need to compete with him over anything else. After all, her initial intention of getting involved with Jiang Ping was simply to gain some benefits. He-Ching-Huan, filled with joy, planted a kiss on Jiang Ping's cheek. Jiang Ping would not let such a good opportunity slip by pulling He-Ching-Huan into his arms, thus commencing his cultivation endeavor. Jiang Ping claimed that he would break through slowly, yet ever since he learned about the function of the tongzi, he became anxious to grow rapidly. He understood clearly that if he did not leave the Yin-Yang Hall, it would be a long time before he could grow. The tongzi had clearly informed him that there was only one blue dot within the Yin-Yang Hall, which was likely the place where Lin Miaoying was in closed-door cultivation. There was no hope for this matter in the next few decades. The only place where breakthroughs could happen was outside the Yin-Yang Hall. Despite Jiang Ping usually appearing weak this time, he truly gave it his all, exhausting all the strength he had regained in just one night. However, Jiang Ping discovered a great secret during the practice of the dual cultivation technique. The energy would eventually circulate through a full cycle, returning to his body and refreshing his spirit. As expected, throughout the night, both of them were fully engaged in their cultivation and achieved breakthroughs. He-Ching-Huan also suddenly realized that her strength had improved. She was increasingly enamored with dual cultivation alongside this old man. He-Ching-Huan's gaze seemed glued to Jiang Ping, unable to comprehend why he was breaking through so swiftly, and every time it happened, it was effortlessly done in bed. Her mind was in a tangle, and she couldn't sort it out. She was now certain that Jiang Ping's future achievements would. At this point, she felt no resistance towards Jiang Ping and was completely devoted to him. She herself couldn't discern if this was love, but in this realm of cultivation where time is boundless, as long as Jiang Ping was by her side, she would not feel lonely or cold. Thinking back to her previous cultivation, it was like a headless fly bumping around with no one to guide her, until she entrusted everything to the man before her, and the changes he brought were astonishing. He-Ching-Huan felt incredibly fortunate. She understood very well that in this world of cultivation, relationships between men and women were often transactional, with women frequently becoming mere playthings and tools for men, discarded when no longer useful. But with Jiang Ping, she felt none of this coldness. At that moment, He-Ching-Huan tilted her head, looking at Jiang Ping, and sweetly said, "Senior brother Jiang, you are truly amazing." Another breakthrough. Jiang Ping reached out to pinch He-Ching-Huan's chin, grinning arrogantly as he said, "Impressive, right?" His demeanor was so proud that it felt as if his tail could reach the sky. He loved hearing women praise his strength. Jiang Ping now looked at his own strength, which was at the 9th level of the Qi refinement stage, and was immensely satisfied, pondering, once upon a time the original owner of this body had long lost hope in this world. Since I was able to cross over to your body, rest assured, I will make this life extraordinary. At this moment, Jiang Ping's 9th level of Qi refinement was not yet stable. He originally planned to meditate and absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to solidify his cultivation, but upon turning to see He-Ching-Huan beside him, he thought perhaps the dual cultivation technique could also help stabilize my cultivation. He-Ching-Huan was still immersed in the afterglow of their previous exchanges in cultivation, not fully returning to her senses, while Jiang Ping energetically began a new round of practice. During this cultivation process, Jiang Ping felt that his gains were quite substantial. He clearly noticed that his understanding of the techniques had deepened, his aura had become more stable, and his realm and strength were steadily improving. Jiang Ping was secretly delighted, increasingly aware that their mutually reinforcing cultivation method was indeed an excellent way to quickly stabilize his realm and strength. By the next day, He Qinghuan rushed out of the herb garden as if something were chasing her. Jiang Ping usually appeared somewhat hunched shaky, as if even standing firmly was a challenge, giving off a sense of weakness that seemed like he could fall down with a gust of wind. However, once he entered a focused state of cultivation and discussion, he seemed to become an entirely different person. He Qinghuan in helplessness could only grit her teeth and concentrate on keeping up with Jiang Ping's pace. She doubted whether her foundation establishment-level cultivation could withstand Jiang Ping's antics. Jiang Ping was on cloud 9. He was currently pondering how to sense the barrier of the foundation establishment stage. As soon as he detected it, he would swallow the foundation establishment pill, thus smoothly entering the foundation establishment stage. Jiang Ping put on his clothes and jumped off the bed. What the heck? His legs gave way, and he fell flat on his face, landing hard. What a disaster. What's going on? It shouldn't be like this. I'm already at the 9th level of the Qi refinement stage, so why is my body getting weaker by the day, unable to stand steady? Jiang Ping once again rolled and crawled to the door, grabbing hold of a stick for support, and barely managed to stand. He glanced at his skin. Hey, it wasn't as dry as before, but rather full of vitality. What on earth? Why can't I stand steadily? Jiang Ping leaned on the stick and approached the riverbank to wash up, also checking his reflection in the water to see what his face looked like now. Upon seeing his reflection, Jiang Ping felt quite satisfied. Although his hair was completely white, unlike before, his skin wasn't dry and shriveled, but rather vibrant. He began to wash up, but the disciples secretly observing him were praying, please don't tell me he was a night of debauchery last night, and now that he's satisfied, he doesn't want to live anymore. Everyone was closely watching Jiang Ping's movements, and when they saw him emerge from the river, they secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Jiang Ping returned to the herb garden, just about to enter the house, to continue contemplating how to break through to the foundation establishment stage, when he heard a commotion outside. Jiang Ping, the sect leader requests your presence. A voice called out. Jiang Ping thought to himself, what could the sect leader want with him? Why didn't she come in person? Was she perhaps embarrassed? Could it be that she found out about his relationship with He Qinghuan? With a nervous heart, Jiang Ping followed the person to meet sect leader Shen Peizhi. Upon reaching the sect leader's residence, Shen Peizhi sat there with a serious expression. Jiang Ping, do you know why I've summoned you? Shen Peizhi asked. Jiang Ping felt a drum in his heart and cautiously replied, disciple does not know, may the sect leader enlighten me. It didn't seem right. Shen Peizhi shouldn't be treating him this way. What had gone wrong? At that moment, an elder brought in a person who was none other than He Qinghuan. Jiang Ping recognized this elder as Li Qiuchan, whom He Qinghuan had mentioned before. She had formerly become Li Cushan's disciple. Jiang Ping squinted his eyes, certain that this matter was undoubtedly related to him. At that time, He Qinghuan was clearly injured, causing Jiang Ping pain in his heart. Jiang Ping stared directly at Shen Peizhi, his eyes filled with unwilling emotions, startling Shen Peizhi. Why was he feeling this way? Did He Qinghuan really mean so much to him? At this moment, Li Qiuchan looked at sect leader Shen Peizhi and said, sect leader, He Qinghuan is secretly cultivating the sect's forbidden technique, the Tai Xianxia. She has just entered the inner sect and has no qualification to cultivate it. I only informed her of the basic formula, yet she now knows the entire set of the Tai Xianxia. Sect leader, according to sect rules, she should be executed immediately. Jiang Ping stared at He Qinghuan lying on the ground, his heart feeling as if it had been tightly gripped, aching terribly. This is my woman. How could she be subjected to such torment? Jiang Ping looked into He Qinghuan's pleading eyes, yet she stammered, unable to utter a single word. Jiang Ping immediately realized she had been silenced. Although Jiang Ping had no knowledge of these techniques, he was a transmigrator, having seen far more than he had experienced. Jiang Ping fixed his gaze on Li Qiuchan, saying, Elder Li, the Tai Xianxia Sutra she practices was given by me. You need not go to such lengths. How can you dispose of a weak woman without clarifying the matter first? Li Qiuchan burst into laughter as an outer sect disciple tending the herb garden. How could you possibly possess the Tai Xianxia Sutra? At this moment, Jiang Ping turned to Shen Peizhi, master, please unlock He Qinghuan's acupoints and let her explain. Shen Peizhi looked at Jiang Ping and directly transmitted a message. Can't you see this is directed at you? How could Jiang Ping not meddle? If he didn't intervene, his woman would be doomed. He Qinghuan was his first woman. How could he not save her? He Qinghuan's helpless gaze was deeply etched into Jiang Ping's heart. She saw him as her support. If he didn't care, could he still call himself a person? Jiang Ping's heart ached, and he did not shrink back at this moment. He just hoped He Qinghuan could speak, wanting to see what Li Qiuchan intended to do. But he knew he had definitely committed a crime today. If Shen Peizhi were to give Li Qiuchan an explanation, she would undoubtedly pin it on him. However, this was also good, at least it could help He Qinghuan. Shen Peizhi extended a finger, and a surge of spiritual energy transformed into a force striking He Qinghuan's chest. He Qinghuan then exhaled deeply and crawled over to Jiang Ping. Jiang Ping, save me. Jiang Ping patted He Qinghuan's back. It's okay, don't worry. As long as I'm here today, no one can hurt you. At that moment, He Qinghuan's aggrieved tears flowed freely. She truly did not expect to get into such trouble. When she was cultivating the xianxia sutra that Jiang Ping had given her, she had been in a secluded place. Yet Li Qiuqian was watching her all along. It seemed she had always been under Li Qiuqian's surveillance. When she practiced the xianxia sutra, Li Qiuqian suddenly appeared. He Qinghuan looked at Jiang Ping and continued, "Elderly threatened me to demand that I ask you for that flying sword, or else she would kill me. I absolutely did not want to die, so Elderly brought me here to the master." Shen Peizhi didn't even need to hear He Qinghuan's explanation, as she understood exactly why Li Qiuqian had brought her here. He Qinghuan definitely had no ability to obtain the xianxia sutra. When He Qinghuan became Li Qiuqian's disciple, Li Qiuqian had already investigated her background thoroughly. She had no support. When Jiang Ping blocked that attack for Shen Peizhi with the flying sword, Li Qiuqian happened to be present, and she knew about He Qinghuan and Jiang Ping's relationship. At first, she couldn't understand why a young girl like He Qinghuan would seek a dying person as a dual cultivation partner. However, when she saw Jiang Ping reveal the flying sword, she realized that he was not an ordinary person, far from being the dying man everyone spoke of. Li Qiuqian, an old monster who had just entered the nascent soul stage and had cultivated for over 100 years, could not possibly fail to see Jiang Ping's lifespan. Moreover, many disciples from various sects had long been observing Jiang Ping's every move. Li Qiuqian knew her time was limited, and she was particularly eager for Jiang Ping's weapon. But there were so many people watching Jiang Ping, if she didn't act quickly, that weapon might end up in someone else's hands. Li Qiuqian was willing to take a gamble. She wanted to see if Jiang Ping would hand over the weapon for He Qinghuan's sake. The reason Li Qiuqian didn't approach Jiang Ping directly, but brought him before Shen Peizhi, was simpler. It could be said that Li Qiuqian was incredibly clever, employing not only an overt strategy, but also the highest level of overt strategy, killing with a borrowed knife while striking at the heart. If this gamble succeeded, she could make Jiang Ping obediently hand over his weapon. She was well aware of Jiang Ping's relationship with Lin Miaoyin. Jiang Ping's xianxia sutra was definitely given by Lin Miaoyin, who was Shen Peizhi's beloved disciple. Li Qiuqian was betting that Shen Peizhi would hold Jiang Ping solely responsible for all the faults. Even if Shen Peizhi wanted to spare Jiang Ping's life, she would have to silence herself. To silence herself, Jiang Ping would have to present the flying sword. This was Li Qiuqian's scheme, perfectly crafted. She was determined to succeed, and was already fantasizing about wielding Jiang Ping's treasured weapon, striding through the martial world with great majesty. At this moment, everyone understood the ins and outs of the situation. Jiang Ping glanced at He Qinghuan. Beside him, Qinghuan, "Don't worry. Stand behind me. I won't let anyone hurt you." At this moment, Jiang Ping couldn't care less about seeking Shen Peizhi's help. The only thing he could do was to silence Li Qiuqian. Only then could he and He Qinghuan be saved, and he wouldn't make things difficult for Master Shen Peizhi. To be honest, Jiang Ping didn't find the flying sword particularly important. He knew that as long as he had the tongzi, he would have even more advanced weapons in the future. So it was fine to let go of this flying sword if it depended on whether Li Qiuqian could handle it. Jiang Ping understood that if she couldn't handle it, it would ultimately return to him. This was the reward of the tongzi, not something that mere artifact refiners could bloodbind. Jiang Ping's eyes fixed intently on Li Qiuqian. "Elderly, here it comes." As he spoke, he threw the flying sword towards Li Qiuqian, its speed startling her. The one most shocked was not Li Qiuqian, but Jiang Ping himself. No, he hadn't intended to kill Li Qiuqian. Why was the flying sword seemingly aimed at her life? Li Qiuqian shouted, "Shameless brat, I'll make sure you die today." As she dodged the flying sword, she reached out to take Jiang Ping's life. Just as her hand was about to clasp Jiang Ping's throat, a mere inch away, Jiang Ping closed his eyes, while He Qinghuan desperately stood up. No. She was ready to block this attack for Jiang Ping. He Qinghuan looked at Jiang Ping. "Jiang Xixiang, please don't forget." After saying this, she lunged directly into Jiang Ping's arms. At that moment, there was a poof sound. Jiang Ping shouted, "No, no. Qinghuan, you mustn't die. I can't live." He Qinghuan looked at Jiang Ping. "Senior brother, just don't forget about me." At that moment, the two of them were tight. He Qinghuan waited for a long time, thinking that Li Qiuqian's strike was too swift, as if she hadn't felt any pain and had died instantly. At this moment, Jiang Ping looked at Li Qiuqian behind. He Qinghuan, noticing that she suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, her physical body disintegrating at that instant. Li Qiuqian slowly turned around to face her attacker. "Master, it's you." At this time, He Qinghuan was completely unharmed. Shen Peizhi had struck, killing Li Qiuqian's physical body in one blow. However, Li Qiuqian was a cultivator at the early stage of nascent soul, and she had already condensed her nascent soul. At that moment, a shadow identical to Li Qiuqian abruptly emerged from the top of her head and fled the hall without looking back. At this moment, Jiang Ping's thoughts shifted. "It's up to you now, Tongzi. You must not let this nascent soul escape." Li Qiuqian could never have imagined that Shen Peizhi would take such ruthless action against her for two insignificant figures. This was the result of her misunderstanding Shen Peizhi's relationship with Jiang Ping. At this moment, Li Qiuqian regretted her actions, deeply wondering what had gone wrong in her seemingly successful plan. She was still in the dark, questioning whether Shin Peiji had acted because of Jiang Ping's connection to Lin Miaoying. Though there was a possibility, it was not enough to justify Shin Peizi's actions. She could not fathom where the problem lay. Just then her nascent soul was about to escape the hall, and Shin Peiji pursued after it. Shin Peiji released the overwhelming pressure of her perfected nascent soul, instantly locking onto Li Kushan's nascent soul, causing Li Qiuchan to visibly falter. At that moment, Jiang Ping's flying sword transformed into a beam of light, instantly piercing through Li Kushan's nascent soul. Li Qiuchan died utterly, not even letting out a final scream before perishing. Shin Peiji looked at Jiang Ping and realized that his strength had already reached the 9th layer of qi refining. This speed seemed faster than those prodigious disciples leveling up. Shin Peiji was almost unable to recognize Jiang Ping. Was he still the same person who had been on the brink of death? With a wave of her hand, Shin Peiji conjured a blaze that completely incinerated all traces of Li Kushan's presence in the hall, leaving not a single mark behind. Shin Peiji glanced at the two still in each other's embrace. Although she felt jealous, she admired He Qinghuan. From start to finish, He Qinghuan's every action revolved around Jiang Ping, with everything concerning Jiang Ping being of utmost importance. Especially in the end, the image of He Qinghuan willing to die for Jiang Ping lingered in Shin Peizi's mind. How many female disciples could be so devoted? Isn't it usually every person for themselves in times of great danger? Yet He Qinghuan was willing to die for Jiang Ping, a beautiful girl sacrificing herself for an old man. This was not pretense, it was a genuine willingness. I am willing to do this for you. Jiang Ping looked at He Qinghuan in his arms, feeling a warm current flow through his heart. He never dreamed that He Qinghuan would be the one to sacrifice herself for him. He understood best why He Qinghuan had initially stayed by his side. It was all for the sake of foundation establishment, purely for personal gain. Yet he never expected that today, He Qinghuan would willingly face death for him, an old man. Could Jiang Ping not be moved? He was overwhelmed with emotions, nearly shedding tears. He stroked He Qinghuan's head. Silly girl, you mustn't do this in the future. He Qinghuan was already in shock, thinking she had died, only to realize that Shin Peiji had intervened. He Qinghuan could never have imagined that this would be the outcome. At this moment, He Qinghuan had already guessed that Jiang Ping and the master definitely had a close relationship, otherwise it would be impossible for her to intervene for just the two of them. Killing an elder of the Yinyang Hall for herself seemed absurd. Unless Jiang Ping was Shin Peizi's most intimate person. While it made sense for Shin Peiji to act against Li Qiuchan for Lin Miaoying, the reasoning seemed too far-fetched. Thus, He Qinghuan concluded that Shin Peiji belonged to Jiang Ping. Jiang Ping at this moment flicked He Qinghuan's forehead. What are you thinking? Jiang Ping may not have noticed He Qinghuan's expression, but how could Shin Peiji not know? She sighed, not intending to hide it from He Qinghuan. You will face it sooner or later. I am his dual cultivation partner, so no need to guess. But once we leave this room, you must keep it a secret. I am your master, and privately you can call me sister. At that moment, He Qinghuan felt as if her mind had short-circuited. What was this? It would be better not to know this secret. If she upset Shin Peiji, would she end up silenced? Was a lofty, perfected, nascent soul cultivator, the master of the Yinyang Hall, really speaking to me just now? Terrified, He Qinghuan knelt down, pleading for her master's forgiveness. Jiang Ping immediately pulled He Qinghuan up. Did you not hear the master say that from now on she is your sister? Shin Peiji felt that the hierarchy was indeed becoming increasingly chaotic, but she chose not to pay attention to He Qinghuan for now, allowing her to digest it slowly. Shin Peiji looked at Jiang Ping. What was that look you just gave? How did you know I wouldn't save her? You are so heartless, so cold, and have wounded my heart. This series of soul-searching questions made Jiang Ping wonder if this was still the Shin Peiji he knew. Was she teasing him, or genuinely questioning him? Jiang Ping felt a headache coming on. He realized that he had indeed looked at Shin Peiji with a somewhat cold expression. However, since it was an unexplainable matter, he chose not to clarify. Not explaining did not mean Jiang Ping would not take action. In front of He Qinghuan, Jiang Ping pulled Shin Peiji into his embrace, his honest lips pressed against Shin Peizi's jade-like ones. Shin Peiji struggled a few times, let out a soft sigh, and chose to give in, wrapping her arms around Jiang Ping's neck. He Qinghuan, still kneeling on the ground, was truly dumbfounded. Was this really Jiang Ping? What should I do now? Should I leave? Can I leave? Did the master allow me to leave? If I leave, will she punish? Now He Qinghuan was terrified. She did not dare to refer to Shin Peiji as her sister. She was still in the Yinyang Hall. Would she even survive? Just as He Qinghuan was about to move away from this place, Shin Peiji pushed Jiang Ping away, saying that today's matter was to be set aside for now. But remember, if you look at me like that again in the future, I will not let it go. Shin Peiji was indeed a bit angry today, as Jiang Ping had shot her that murderous glance, causing her heart to skip a beat. At that moment, she felt the same way Jiang Ping did. It was as if someone had gripped her heart tightly, causing her great pain. Jiang Ping still wanted to embrace Shin Peiji, but at this moment, he had completely forgotten about the previous incident. It was a time of dry wood and fierce fire, yet Shen Peiji pushed him away. Shen Peiji looked at Jiang Ping and quickly left the place. Jiang Ping, feeling helpless, turned to see He Qinghuan still there, and he grabbed her and vanished in a flash. At this moment, He Qinghuan was in a daze, truly feeling that her mind was insufficient. Jiang Ping took He Qinghuan back to the medicinal garden, quickly busy taking off his clothes. He was ignited by Shen Peiji, and he needed to resolve the matter. Seeing Jiang Ping about to do that again, He Qinghuan thought of his endless manner, and she directly fled, pushing Jiang Ping aside and escaping from the medicinal garden. Jiang Ping felt helpless, saying, "You all are too much. You are all my women. How can you bully an old man like this? Is it so easy to bully honest people?" However, at this moment, Jiang Ping noticed that he was all fired up and there was no choice but to go to the back of the medicinal garden to wash up. Only cold water could cool his passion. Meanwhile, the inner disciples, observing Jiang Ping, nearly burst into laughter. Today, Jiang Ping is really not doing well. He just walked in and finished his business in less than a minute. It seems he really is getting old. Didn't he see that girl running out? That old guy must have eaten quite a few red pills. Look at him, now taking a cold shower. Yes, that's the situation. He is at his last gasp. The disciples hidden in the shadows were chattering and mocking Jiang Ping, but he surely didn't know, or he would be furious. After washing up, Jiang Ping returned to his room, carefully examining his body. He could only continue cultivating. His body was simply not enough to advance to foundation establishment. He could only continue refining his body, but he was already at the 9th level of qi refining. What should he do next? Now cultivating had become a problem. Forget it, I might as well practice the He Huan Gong. With no women around, I could only cultivate alone. Jiang Ping increasingly enjoyed cultivation because he wanted to grow stronger. He wished to leave the Yin Yang Hall. He had to go out to become stronger. Only by leaving the Yin Yang Hall could he find those blue dots he sought. But the prerequisite was that he must establish his foundation. Jiang Ping began to channel his spiritual energy, circulating it according to the meridians of his body. He had become so familiar with it that every time he operated it, it was effortless, no longer awkward. Although his body was old, Jiang Ping's heart was still young. This time he again lost control, exhausting all his spiritual energy. He circulated it 9 times, and his meridians and bones had improved to some extent. Now he wanted to absorb some spiritual energy from the surroundings. Damn, it seemed he didn't even have the strength to absorb spiritual energy. What kind of situation was this? Jiang Ping was truly bewildered because in his memory there was no such thing as exhausting spiritual energy without being able to replenish it. If he were to explain it, it would be that the system also consumed spiritual energy. Forget it, I won't think about it, it's not important. Jiang Ping knew he just needed to stay put and avoid falling. Now the only thing he could do was to recover slowly here. Jiang Ping was very clear that given enough time, he would recover some spiritual energy. It seemed he needed someone by his side while cultivating in the future. Jiang Ping suddenly realized something was off. Whenever he cultivated alone, he exhausted his spiritual energy completely, but whenever he practiced dual cultivation, there was no issue. While the essence of He Huan Gong was to dual cultivate, what was he even practicing? Only now did Jiang Ping truly comprehend that this system was also a scheming entity. Since the initial stages of He Huan Gong were useless, why was it even introduced? Wasn't it just to trap the host? When Jiang Ping realized this, he took out the first illustrated manual. During his first observation, he had only learned about mid-stage dual cultivation. He hadn't studied the more profound aspects carefully. The second illustrated book informed him that dual cultivation could heal wounds and treat ailments without any harm to oneself, and it could even nourish oneself. The second book was currently useless. He should thoroughly study the first book. Since he had already practiced dual cultivation, he should continue to cultivate further. Jiang Ping felt overwhelmed because as He Huan Gong progressed, its requirements for him also increased. If he entered the Golden Core stage, he could learn the opponent's techniques and combat skills during dual cultivation, essentially achieving near-complete replication. This was the highest stage of dual cultivation in He Huan Gong. At this time, Jiang Ping's heart was filled with the desire for strength, but the Golden Core stage had nothing to do with him. Establishing a core was not a simple matter. Given his current condition, he estimated that without nearly 50 years of effort, it was futile to think about it. His physique was simply too weak. What would he do if he really had to fight someone? He would be beaten to death. He must have the strength to protect himself. The cultivation techniques of the sect were too impractical and of no use to him. If he wanted to be stronger, he had to learn the techniques within the system. No, I need to find a way to earn another point. Right now, the only reward from the system is a flying sword. I need to focus on this flying sword and practice a technique regarding it. He Huan sword costs 3 points. Doesn't the system have any task rewards for points? Anyway, Jiang Ping's spiritual energy was drained, and he couldn't move. So this time he began to earnestly study the system. In the beginning, he cursed the system, but the rewards it provided also gave him a headache. This time he started to seriously research the system bit by bit, looking to see what other uses it might have. Since it's a golden finger, he needed to make himself stronger. After half a day of studying the system, Jiang Ping still couldn't figure it out. He sighed helplessly, thinking that this damned system was truly love-hate. At that moment, a commotion suddenly erupted outside the door. Jiang Ping furrowed his brows, wondering who was causing trouble again. He got up to open the door, and luckily, he had just regained some spiritual energy. His legs felt weak, and he nearly fell again, but this time he managed to support himself against the door. Jiang Ping opened the door with a whoosh, and lo and behold, two disciples were arguing heatedly in front of him. Jiang Ping glanced over and saw one disciple who was so fat, he looked like a ball. His small eyes were nearly squeezed shut by fat. However, Jiang Ping noticed that this guy's small eyes were still quite spirited. Jiang Ping couldn't help but wonder, is this really a disciple of the Yin Yang Hall? How come I feel like I've never seen such a character before? What exactly is going on? At that moment, the fat disciple spoke up. Senior brother Jiang, I'm a new outer sect disciple. I have my eye on this 50-year-old bitter green vine, but this guy tried to snatch it from me. As he spoke, his large frame suddenly leaned against Jiang Ping, nearly knocking him over. Jiang Ping could hardly withstand his antics. At that moment, Jiang Ping suddenly noticed a storage bag had been discreetly handed to him. He chuckled inwardly, thinking this fat guy has quite the schemes, even knows how to bribe me. The key point was that Jiang Ping didn't really dislike this fat guy. He was clear in his mind that this herb was something this fat guy wanted to steal. But Jiang Ping didn't care about that. It was just a single herb. He said to the other disciple, you should just go pick an. The disciple was so anxious, he started stamping his feet. Senior brother Jiang, this is the only bitter green vine left in the medicinal garden. Our senior brother specifically asked me to pick it. If I can't bring it back, I'll be punished. Jiang Ping waved his hand to interrupt him. Go back and tell your senior brother that there are no bitter green vines in the medicinal garden, or just say that I won't allow it. If he has the ability, let him come here himself. After finishing, Jiang Ping cast a sidelong glance at the fat guy, who immediately made a face at him, the implication being clear. Senior brother Jiang, what a remarkable person. The disciple stamped his foot and stormed off in anger. He might dare to provoke the fatty, but he absolutely lacked the courage to challenge Jiang Ping, who didn't know that Jiang Ping was protected by Lin Miaoyin in the Yin Yang Hall, and no one dared to offend him. Moreover, a few days ago, Jiang Ping had blocked an attack for the sect leader in front of the elders and inner disciples. Now the name Jiang Ping was at least well known within the sect, and everyone knew there was a troublesome old guy in the medicinal garden who walked unsteadily and had a penchant for lechery, but was physically weak with a rumored record of only 1 minute. If Jiang Ping knew this, he would probably find a block of tofu to smash his head against. After all, he was a transmigrator, just having the bad luck of inhabiting the body of a dying person. How could he not be angered by such humiliation? He would probably be so furious that his lungs would burst. At this moment, Jiang Ping looked at the large fatty in front of him and said unhappily, you dead fatty, what's your situation? The fatty showed a self-satisfied grin, thinking he looked irresistible, but his entire face wrinkled up, making his eyes almost disappear. Unable to help himself, Jiang Ping muttered, damn, is this still a human? I really want to go up and straighten out his features. The fatty looked at Jiang Ping and said, I know you. Jiang Ping rolled his eyes at him. What do you know about me? I know that you're the lecherous old man in the entire sect. As soon as the fatty finished speaking, he noticed Jiang Ping's expression was not right, and quickly changed his tone. However, you are also the most flamboyant old man in the sect. Jiang Ping heard this and thought, what nonsense is this? If this dead fatty can't compliment someone, then don't bother. His words made Jiang Ping feel uncomfortable. He looked at the fatty and asked, where did you come from? Reporting to Jiang Xixiang, I just arrived. I heard there are many female disciples in the Yin Yang Hall, so I pulled some strings to come here. Jiang Ping was taken aback. Damn, this dead fatty is actually a prince. He thought to himself, this guy must be the least favored prince. How could he manage a country looking like that? Jiang Ping looked at the fatty and asked, what's your name? Reporting Xixiang, my name is Lu Dabobeo. From now on, I'll follow you. Jiang Xixiang, I plan to go back and tell the elders that I want to move to your medicinal garden to live. I want to refine the world's best elixir, one pill to hold up the sky. Jiang Ping lost his balance and nearly fell flat on his face. So not only is this guy lecherous, but he's also a purebred lecher. Upon hearing that this guy wanted to move in, Jiang Ping actually didn't feel disgusted. He thought Lu Dabobeo was quite interesting and suited his taste. But no way, this is the place where he cultivates with He Qinghuan and Xin Peiji. How could he let Lu Dabobeo stay here? Jiang Ping waved his hand decisively and refused to get lost. Saying this, he lifted his foot to kick Lu Dabobeo's backside, not knowing that Lu Dabobeo's physique was too large and his cultivation was much higher. Jiang Ping's kick didn't move him at all. Instead, he was rebounded backward a few steps and ended up sitting on the ground gasping for breath. Lu Dabobeo chuckled. Jiang Xixiang, does that mean you agree to let me live here? Jiang Ping was furious, cursing, get lost. You'd better hurry up and get lost. Upon seeing that Jiang Ping was really angry, Lu Dabobeo grabbed the medicinal herbs and ran off. Just a few steps away, he heard the shout from behind, come back. Lu Dabobeo thought Jiang Ping had changed his mind and hurriedly ran back. Jiang Xixiang, do you agree now? Jiang Ping was so angry. Agree my ass. Hurry up and help me up. Jiang Ping had just been knocked down by Lu Dababao's rebound and was sitting on the ground unable to move. Those observing Jiang Ping around the medicinal garden nearly burst into laughter. Damn, that old fellow is really exhausted. How many good days can he have with this body? But this old fellow is also a tough guy. Even like this, he still thinks about finding He Qinghuan every day. Hey, why did He Qinghuan pick such a character? Could it be that He Qinghuan is also after Jiang Ping's flying sword? He Qinghuan is under the tutelage of elderly Qiuchang. Could it be for elderly Qiuchang? These people were talking among themselves, quickly piecing together the key to the situation. After all, the entire Yinyang Hall was focused on Jiang Ping's flying sword. Lu Dababao helped Jiang Ping into the room and chuckled. Jiang Xixiang, your physique isn't great. You should let me stay. I can take care of you in the future. Look at you like this, really. Lu Dababao said, wearing a look of regret. Jiang Ping was furious, but it seemed Lu Dababao wasn't wrong. As shouldn't he take in a little brother? This guy indeed suited his taste. But what about cultivating dual practice with He Qinghuan later? Forget it, let's deal with it then. Jiang Ping looked at Lu Dababao and asked, Fatty, which elder did you join under in the Yinyang Hall? As a prince, how could you come to the Yinyang Hall without finding a decent master? Upon mentioning this, Lu Dababao got angry. Damn it, I heard there's a stunning beauty in the Yinyang Hall named Lin Miao, and I came for her, but she is in seclusion. What do you want me to do? Upon hearing this, Jiang Ping realized that this fatty was actually trying to make a move on his woman. He initially wanted to get up and beat him up, but unfortunately he was too weak to do so. Forget it, I can endure it. Lu Dababao continued, it's fine if I can't see Lin Miaoyin, but I think our sect leader is even more exciting. I want to take her as my master, but she doesn't even bother to pay attention to me. At this moment, Jiang Ping's eyes were spinning wildly. He wasn't thinking, but rather looking for his walking stick. He was ready to go all out against Lu Dababao. A gentleman can be killed, but cannot be humiliated. If he can endure this, he would be too bullied. Lu Dababao was still chattering on, completely unaware that Jiang Ping was about to explode. Jiang Ping directly interrupted Lu Dababao, saying, which elder are you currently under? I'm not under anyone. I'm just living in the alchemy room. I want to refine the highest grade red pills, but I got kicked out by those people. Jiang Xixiang, you must take me anyway. I have nowhere else to go. Jiang Ping understood now. Oh, it turned out that this fatty just liked refining red pills. What a rare phenomenon, and for the first time Jiang Ping felt happy. At that moment, He Qinghuan returned after finishing her cultivation. As she pushed open the door, her brows furrowed, watching Lu Dababao, warily thinking someone was there to harm Jiang Ping again. He Qinghuan slowly moved to Jiang Ping's side, glanced at him. Her eyes seemed to ask, who is this guy? Jiang Ping casually replied, my little brother. He Qinghuan was stunned, unable to believe her ears. What? Little brother? Just this fatty? His small eyes are almost blocked by fat, and his vision isn't good either. He's going to be your little brother. He must have ulterior motives. He Qinghuan immediately thought that this fatty was likely also after Jiang Ping's flying sword. At this moment, Lu Dababao quickly stood up, his eyes wide open, never expecting there would be such a beautiful female disciple in the sect. Uncontrollably, he started to move closer to He Qinghuan. Jiang Ping glared and shouted, get lost. She is mine. Lu Dabo, thinking Jiang Ping was joking, replied, brother, stop messing around with your frail body. You can barely walk without support. Jiang Ping was seriously angry. Get out. Leave now. I don't want to see you. Brother, are you serious? Is she really my sister-in-law? Of course. Who else would come to see me? Lu Dabo thought about it and realized it made sense. You're on the verge of collapse, yet she doesn't mind being with you. That's true love. With that, Lu Dabo took out a jade vial filled with red pills. Jiang Ping was left speechless by Lu Dabo's actions, while He Qinghuan was so embarrassed that her face felt like it was dripping water. She couldn't stand it in front of Lu Dabo and ran away. Lu Dabo couldn't help but admire He Qinghuan's figure and face, exclaiming, sister-in-law, your beauty is unmatched. It's like a flower blooming on cow dung. He didn't pay attention to his words as Jiang Ping's hungry wolf-like gaze was fixed on him. Jiang Ping was determined to use all his recovered strength and lunged at Lu Dabo, shouting, I'll fight you. A gentleman can be killed, but cannot be humiliated. Lu Dabo, however, wasn't one to take Jiang Ping seriously. He easily subdued him. Brother, what do you mean by this? Jiang Ping was furious. Let me go now. Lu Dabo helped Jiang Ping onto the bed. Although Jiang Ping had just suffered a crushing defeat, at least he felt somewhat relieved. Brother, your body is too weak. Don't overexert yourself in the future. Don't worry. As long as I'm here, no one will dare to bully you in the medicine garden. Jiang Ping, who had just calmed down, was ignited by Lu Dabo's words. Without you, no one would dare to bully me either. Lu Dabo didn't want to argue with Jiang Ping, saying, brother, don't skimp on the pills. You need to take more for your health. You bastard. Brother, you must ensure sister-in-law is happy. After saying that, he gave Jiang Ping an encouraging look. Jiang Ping wanted to fight Lu Dabo again, but he decided against it. If this continued, he would be the first to fall. I can endure, can I? Just wait, you fatso. Once I become powerful, I'll make you regret it so badly that even your mother won't recognize you. Brother, you rest well, while I'll go get a bigger bed and some food and drinks. Today is our first meeting, and I'll become sworn brothers with you. Let's not go into the details. We are good brothers, and you are my elder brother. The fatso is not stupid. You as an old man, how could I possibly die on the same day as you? Jiangping couldn't be bothered with the fatso. He truly needed to recover now. Originally, he had hoped to replenish his strength through dual cultivation with He Qinghuan, but all of that was disrupted by this fatso. However, Jiangping was still quite happy. At least he wouldn't be lonely in the medicine garden. Though this fatso was a bit off, he was generally to Jiangping's liking, and that was enough. Jiangping suddenly thought of something. Since this fatso could refine red pills, it meant he understood alchemy. He needed to ask him if he could refine pills, as he urgently required elixirs to replenish his spiritual and physical energy. If he had such pills, he wouldn't run out of energy while practicing the Huan art alone. This fatso was quite capable. In no time, he returned with a rabbit, a chicken, and 2 jars of wine in hand. Let's not forget there were other disciples from the elders around observing the situation. These disciples were startled to see what the fatso was carrying. He wouldn't have caught the spirit pets raised by Elder Zhou. That shouldn't be possible. Elder Zhou treats those spirit pets like treasures and guards them closely. How could a foundation establishment cultivator like him get his hands on Elder Zhou's treasures? No way, absolutely not. But it certainly looks like it. Look at that rabbit's red eyes. Its fur is snow white, and that chicken is multicolored. Damn, it's definitely the Bayou rabbit and the xianxia bird. What the hell, it really is Elder Zhou's treasure? This is going to be a good show. These disciples loved to see a commotion and quickly used sound transmission to spread the news. Soon all disciples in the sect knew that Elder Zhou's Bayou rabbit and xianxia bird were caught by a new fatso who intended to roast them. That rabbit and bird were Elder Zhou's lifeblood, and the entire sect was thrown into chaos. Jiangping was unaware of all this. Seeing something delicious, he drooled. He indeed needed to replenish himself. Brother, you rest well while I'll handle this. I must say this fatso really knows how to eat. He was quick and efficient. In no time, the rabbit and chicken were cleanly slaughtered, and the fur was properly handled. Jiangping looked at the fatso with newfound respect. At that moment, his eyes widened as he saw the fatso harvesting various spiritual herbs in the medicine garden and stuffing them into the rabbit and chicken. Jiangping thought to himself, this kid is impressive. Having traversed time, how could he not understand? This is medicinal cuisine. Jiangping was truly astonished at how early he encountered medicinal cuisine. It seemed that there was a reason this fatso was so plump. He had all the conditions: timing, location, and human harmony. Jiangping knew without thinking that this barbecue would be delicious. With the fatso's technique and craftsmanship, there was nothing to criticize. Before long, the fatso had built a fire, and the crackling of burning wood added warmth to the tranquil medicine garden. Jiangping didn't know what he was thinking, gazing into the distance. At that moment, the aroma of roasting meat wafted into Jiangping's nose, snapping him back to reality. The fatso directly handed Jiangping a chicken leg, saying, "Brother, eat. Brother, have a drink." Jiangping couldn't remember the last time he had smelled wine, as suddenly he felt a longing for it. Without hesitation, he clinked his cup with the fatso's wine jar and said, "Bro, cheers." The two of them took a big gulp and laughed heartily at each other. Jiangping hadn't felt this carefree in a long time. This was the first time he felt so relaxed since coming back. This is what life should be like: sleeping with a woman, eating with wine and meat, and having brothers to share unhappiness with. Life is short, and having these is enough. The fatso also seemed to have been repressed for a long time and finally found a place to release. He and Jiangping exchanged cups and devoured meat and drink. Both were cultivators. Although Jiangping's strength was low, he could easily expel the alcohol using his spiritual energy, but he didn't want to. Today he just wanted to get drunk. He recalled many things. At this moment, looking into the distance, he became even more determined about his cultivation goal. He must become powerful. Today the fatso reminded him again that strength is the hard truth. In such a world, if one is not strong, they cannot protect their loved ones, nor can they preserve their own life. Jiangping decided to indulge today with the fatso. Once he sobered up, he would think of every possible way to grow stronger. It wasn't just Li Qiuchan in the sect who coveted his flying sword. There were certainly others as well. If this flying sword were wielded by a nascent soul cultivator, it wouldn't be surprising, but the issue was that he was merely a chi refinement stage cultivator. To put it bluntly, can a chi refinement cultivator really be considered a cultivator? They had only just begun to use spiritual energy to strengthen their body. Thus those prominent figures understood that it was the sword itself that was remarkable, and it had nothing to do with Jiangping. Just as Jiangping and Lu Daba were drinking merrily, a thunderous sound erupted directly above the herb. Both Jiangping and Lu Daba jolted upright, their drunkenness vanishing in an instant, and Jiangping, not knowing where the strength came from, stood up in a flash. At that moment they looked up, and what they saw was astounding. They discovered that many disciples of the Yinyang Palace had surrounded them, all there to watch the spectacle. At first Jiangping thought that the Blood Demon sect was here to cause trouble and seize the flying sword, but upon seeing the surrounding disciples, he quickly realized they were definitely not from the blood demon sect. At that moment, Jiang Ping and the chubby guy were staring at the person in the void. It was an old man, completely bald with a shiny head, short in stature, yet emanating a powerful aura, clearly a formidable nascent soul expert. At this time, Lu Daba, gazing at the old man in the void, showed no signs of fear and directly shouted, "Old man, you scared me to death. Just tell me, what do you want?" This casual remark from the chubby guy was unexpected, yet there were over 1,000 disciples watching. Nearly all the disciples of the Yinyang Palace had gathered there. They never expected this chubby guy to be so audacious, completely disregarding the old man. Who among these disciples didn't know that the old man in the void was not to be trifled with? Just getting close to where he kept his spiritual beasts would leave them unable to speak, instantly swept away by powerful spiritual energy. This old man was not only hard to talk to, but was practically impervious to reason. Yet this chubby guy was so bold, directly calling him old man. He either had a head full of nonsense or was an extraordinary character. At this moment, the old man above glared at Lu Daba and said, "You fat bastard, I'm going to peel your skin and pull your tendons today for daring to steal my spiritual pet." Before the old man could finish his sentence, Lu Daba interrupted, "Grandpa Gio, that's enough. It's just a rabbit and a chicken. I'll have my father send you a whole nest of chickens. It's no big deal. Oh, I thought it was about stealing eggs. Stop shouting, go back quickly. Look at how scared my brother is. His legs are all soft." Jiang Ping was furious. Even at this moment, Lu Daba still didn't forget to berate him. "You bastard fat man, am I scaring you? I can barely stand as it is." At this moment, the surrounding disciples couldn't hold back any longer, bursting into laughter, with some female disciples almost in tears from laughing. Everyone in the sect knew how difficult it was to deal with Elder Gio, and no wonder this fat man was so fearless. Turns out he was a relative. However, Elder Gio clearly wasn't going to give the fat man any face. "I won't spare you today." Elder Gio's eyes widened in fury as he waved his hands when overwhelming pressure rushed towards Lu Daba like a fierce wind. As for Lu Daba, he thudded to his knees as if immobilized, not daring to move an inch. However, that wasn't the end. Elder Gio's sharp eyes, like those of an eagle, quickly spotted Jiang Ping standing at the door, holding the tree stick he leaned on. With a flick of his mind, Elder Gio manipulated Jiang Ping's stick and began to smack it against Lu Daba's rear. Even though the fat man was immobilized by the pressure, his mouth was still moving. Moreover, Jiang Ping was well aware that Lu Daba managed to blend into the Yinyang Palace largely due to Elder Gio's connections. Even though Elder Gio was furious, he might not truly harm Lu Daba. At most, he would just teach him a lesson. However, when Lu Daba began to speak, Jiang Ping realized that today's events might not be so simple, for Lu Daba's mouth was notoriously reckless. "Grandpa Gio, are you really hitting me? Ouch, that hurts. Grandpa Gio, did you forget that your family is still living under my father's care? Have you forgotten about your chubby wife whom my grandfather took care of? Your son and grandson are all being looked after by my father. Do you think my father won't get angry if he knows you hit me?" After this outburst, everyone present was stunned, unable to help but think, could it be that Elder Gio had been cuckolded? However, this thought only turned in their minds. Who would dare say it out loud? The consequences would likely turn them. Jiang Ping looked up at Elder Gio, who was already bald with not a single hair. At that moment, Jiang Ping felt as if smoke was rising from Elder Gio's head, giving him the illusion that he had just been so infuriated that he ignited his own hair. Oh no, fat man, why can't you keep your mouth shut?" Jiang Ping felt a wave of anxiety for Lu Daba. As expected, in the next second, the chubby guy went from kneeling to lying flat on the ground, his mouth pressed tightly to the floor. Speaking was impossible, and he could only let out a fart. However, just as everyone was stunned, Lu Daba indeed let out a fart. Everyone stifled their laughter, and Jiang Ping was dumbfounded. What kind of bizarre maneuver was this? "Lu Daba, if you can survive today, I'll call you brother. This fat man is truly the most peculiar person in the world." Jiang Ping thought he was already quite impressive, but after meeting this fat man, he felt utterly inferior. At this moment, Elder Gio's face turned green. He no longer remained in the void, and with a flash appeared beside Lu Daba. It seemed that controlling the stick to hit Lu Daba wasn't satisfying enough. He grabbed the stick himself and started to hit vigorously. Just imagine an old monster at the nascent soul stage wielding a stick to hit someone. Jiang Ping couldn't bear to watch any longer. The fat man had turned into a bloody mess, his rear and beaten to a pulp. This was no longer a relative, it was downright enmity. However, Jiang Ping thought it through. Lu Daba had stolen Elder Gio's spiritual pet, and his grandfather had also stolen Elder Gio's chubby wife. This old and new resentment was all landing on Lu Daba. It was likely that Elder Gio, considering his descendants were living under Lu Daba's father's protection in Taikon country, would not truly want Lu Daba dead today. Without that connection, Lu Daba would surely be finished. At this moment, Jiang Ping felt that Lu Daba was inhaling more than he was exhaling. Regardless, Lu Daba's life was not in danger. These were just flesh wounds. However, with such severe injuries, Lu Daba wouldn't be able to get up for at least 20 days. Jiang Ping initially thought the matter was settled, but clearly Elder Gio had not finished speaking. At this moment Elder Jiao turned to Jiang Ping. Old man, come here. Jiang Ping was furious, thinking, who is older, you or me? Who is the real old man here? I'm just a 20-year-old transmigrator. How dare you call me an old man? However, Jiang Ping could only think this in his heart. Given the temper of this old fellow, if he dared to retort, he would be dead with a stick on his back. Elder Jiao was clearly losing patience. I'm talking to you, old man. Didn't you hear me? I said come here. Jiang Ping was extremely angry. This was clearly bullying. Didn't you see me moving? Jiang Ping didn't know what was happening. He felt himself moving towards Elder Jiao, taking steps, but he was moving very slowly. It wasn't that Jiang Ping wasn't moving. He was probably genuinely frightened by Elder Jiao. His body was weak, and as he moved it felt like he was trembling as if he had Parkinson's. Elder Jiao was growing increasingly impatient, stretching out his hand to pull Jiang Ping closer, and looking at him said, how does my white jade rabbit and colorful bird taste? What could Jiang Ping say? Not speaking was the best answer, as should he admit it tasted good. Jiang Ping. At this moment Elder Jiao asked again, old man, I'm talking to you. Do you hear me? Do you really think that with Lin Miaoyin protecting you no one in the sect would dare to touch you? Today I'll help you descend into hell to accompany my spirit pet. Jiang Ping never expected that a mere chicken thief would end up getting beaten half to death, and he would lose his life just for eating a bit of meat. At this moment Jiang Ping truly realized that relatives were real relatives, and he was indeed an outsider. While they spoke, Elder Jiao raised his hand and directly flung Jiang Ping towards the room. With Jiang Ping's current physique, although he wouldn't lose his life from being flung out, he would definitely suffer broken bones. Just as Jiang Ping was thrown out, a gentle force wrapped around him, gently placing him on the ground. At this moment, everyone saw a voluptuous figure standing in the void, and the person was Shen Peizhi. Shen Peizhi had no idea what was happening here, as such matters could not possibly reach her ears directly. However, He Qinghuan, seeing everything happening here, knew that the situation was not simple. She had been in the sect for quite a while. How could she not know about Elder Jiao's temperament? When she saw Elder Jiao punishing Lu Daba, she hurriedly left to seek help. She clearly understood that Jiang Ping would be implicated, so the only one who could save him now was Shen Peizhi. Shen Peizhi had been here for a while, but she was concealed in the void, wanting to observe Jiang Ping's reaction. However, she easily perceived his inner feelings and realized that Jiang Ping wasn't particularly afraid, which made her quite satisfied. It was just that Elder Jiao was truly ruthless. Punishing an outer sect disciple was not a big deal, even if he killed him. But when Elder Jiao mentioned Lin Miaoyin shielding Jiang Ping, Shen Peizhi felt a twinge of jealousy. Shen Peizhi quickly dismissed that thought. Oh, what was she competing with her disciple for? Besides, her disciple and Jiang Ping weren't even in a relationship yet. She should be the one to advance first, and it shouldn't be her worrying about Lin Miaoyin getting jealous. Elder Jiao, upon seeing the person in the void, furrowed his brows, not understanding why Shen Peizhi was appearing. Shen Peizhi's character would never meddle in trivial matters. Could it be that she truly came forward for her precious disciple Lin Miaoyin? Seeing Shen Peizhi arrive, Elder Jiao knew it was impossible to deal with Jiang Ping anymore. Since Jiang Ping had just been saved, there was no way for him to punish him further. Elder Jiao did not speak to Shen Peizhi, but instead looked at Lu Daba, who lay on the ground like a dead dog, then glanced at Jiang Ping, tossing him a jade bottle. Give this to him. Jiang Ping didn't even see Elder Jiao move his feet. He had already disappeared before him. Such power was too overwhelming. Jiang Ping then approached Lu Daba. My goodness, this is too tragic. Is there any semblance of a human left? Jiang Ping wanted to help Lu Daba, but decided against it due to his own weak limbs. He looked at the surrounding disciples. Have you all seen enough? Come help him. At this moment, a crowd of disciples rushed over. It wasn't that Jiang Ping had great charisma. It was because he managed the herb garden, and these people often interacted with him. Usually Jiang Ping didn't make things difficult for these disciples. Even without the elders' orders, if they wanted to use some herbs, he would still help them. So even though Jiang Ping's strength was lacking, at least he had established a good reputation. A group of people hurriedly helped Lu Daba into the room. At this moment, Jiang Ping looked at Shen Peizhi in the void, and she directly sent him a message. Is the jade slip I gave you just for show? Did you forget about me already? Jiang Ping smirked. No way is she trying to act cute with me. Oh man. Shen Peizhi either didn't speak, or when she did, it made Jiang Ping feel restless. Jiang Ping had made up his mind out tonight. He would seek Shen Peizhi to discuss life. At this moment, in front of the sect disciples, he directly bowed to Shen Peizhi. Thank you, master, for saving my life. Shen Peizhi nodded, then her voice covered the entire sect. All of you return to your cultivation. Anyone who remains in the herb garden after 3 breaths will face severe punishment. Then her figure flickered and vanished. He Qinghuan approached Jiang Ping and whispered, Are you really going to let him stay here? Jiang Ping's expression turned serious. Of course, didn't you run away when you saw me? Didn't you say you didn't want to? He Qinghuan, taken aback by Jiang Ping's question, suddenly felt she had made a mistake. She hadn't fulfilled her duty as a woman. However, she thought, but you never stopped talking. And she really couldn't handle it. Seeing He Qinghuan's aggrieved expression, Jiang Ping decided not to tease her anymore and embraced her. I'm just joking, I need a helper here. It's not safe for me to be alone as sometimes I can't handle danger by myself. Upon hearing Jiang Ping say this, He Qinghuan's heart melted. Senior brother Jiang Ai. Jiang Ping responded to He Qinghuan with action, pressing his honest lips against her cherry-like mouth. He Qinghuan thought Jiang Ping was going to take it to the next level, and she twisted, can we not do this here? Glancing at the dead fat guy. Jiang Ping was speechless. Did he really appear to others as just a stud? Didn't he know there were outsiders? Jiang Ping gently sent He Qinghuan away, soothing her before entering the house, where he was immediately frightened to the point of his soul nearly leaving his body. At that moment, the fat man showed no signs of injury and simply sat on the bed saying, big brother, you're not doing well. I gave you so many red pills, why haven't you taken them? I told you with my little brothers around, what do you have to fear? I can support you. What a pity to have missed such a great opportunity. I missed out on a wonderful show, and I estimate my sister-in-law must have very fair skin. Jiang Ping realized once again that relatives are true relatives while he, an outsider, is indeed an outsider. It turns out Elder Jiao was just putting on a show for others within the sect, and in the end, he was the one to be cast aside. He was truly the fool in this situation. In the end, the key to venting his anger was to end his own life, and that would be the end of the matter. Jiang Ping approached the dead fat man, reached out, and grabbed Lu Debao's ear, asking, tell me, just now, when your grandfather Jiao wanted to kill me, why didn't you wake up to stop him? Lu Debao's was furious. Look at me. How could I get up in this state? Jiang Ping clearly did not understand his meaning as Lu Debao's took out a jade token from his pocket. Jiang Ping felt a cool and refreshing sensation instantly enter his body, and the spiritual power within him was almost fully restored. Jiang Ping looked at the jade token and asked Lu Debao's, what is this? Lu Debao's replied, this is a recovery token my grandfather obtained in the lands of the barbarian tribes. As long as it doesn't cost me my life, having this jade token with me will quickly replenish my depleted spiritual power, and it also has powerful healing functions. This recovery token is a treasure coveted by alchemists and artifact masters everywhere. Jiang Ping's eyes sparkled with greed. This is also the treasure I have long desired. Seeing Jiang Ping's gaze, Lu Debao's felt more fear than when he encountered a beautiful woman. He seriously waved the recovery token in front of Jiang Ping a few times, quickly put it away, and changed the subject, clearly not wanting to dwell on this matter with Jiang Ping. Lu Debao's said, big brother, let's talk about something serious. Jiang Ping, brought back to reality, nodded. Lu Debao's looked at him and asked, big brother, do you have a flying sword? Jiang Ping exclaimed, what the hell, fatty, what's going on? Jiang Ping instantly linked this dead fat pig to Elder Jiao's orders. Lu Debao's shook his head, then nodded. Big brother, rest assured, since I, Lu Debao's, recognize you as my elder brother, you will always be my elder brother. I will never go back on my word. Who would betray their elder brother as a little brother? Big brother, I have two things to discuss with you. First, Elder Jiao asked me to get close to you to learn about the origin of your flying sword. He didn't ask me to seize it, nor does he have any intention of taking your flying sword. Jiang Ping looked at Lu Debao's, realizing that he probably wasn't lying and his attitude was very sincere. However, Jiang Ping still couldn't trust this dead fat man. So what's the second matter? Jiang Ping asked. Lu Debao's slowly leaned closer to him. There are spies from the blood demon sect within our sect. Just the other day when I arrived at the Yinyang Hall, I overheard two disciples of considerable status talking about you. The main thing is that a nascent soul elder from the blood demon sect is always on standby outside the Yinyang Hall, ready to kill you and seize your treasures at the first opportunity. Upon hearing this, Jiang Ping felt somewhat overwhelmed. He anticipated that someone would be against him, but he never expected that there would be a nascent soul monster always watching him, ready to kill and seize his treasures. This news was extremely important to Jiang Ping. He looked at Lu Debao's and asked, what should we do next? Lu Debao's widened his eyes, feeling as if he was not familiar with Jiang Ping. You're the big brother, not me. You make the decisions, and besides, the flying sword isn't mine. Jiang Ping stared at Lu Debao's, fat brother, how about we discuss something? Lu Debao's rolled his eyes, knowing that Jiang Ping didn't have any good intentions at this moment, but he's still patient. Debao's, you see, if big brother can't protect the flying sword, I might as well not keep it. Oh, why not just hand it over directly to your grandfather Jiao? Lu Debao's knew that Jiang Ping was definitely not so kind-hearted. However, Lu Debao's smiled knowingly, which Jiang Ping had already anticipated. Lu Debao's suddenly pretended to look pitiful. Big brother, what kind of look is that? Just say it, I can handle it. Jiang Ping didn't care about that anymore, nor did he want to think about whether Lu Debao's was trying to trick him again. Debao's, I'll exchange the flying sword for your recovery token. Jiang Ping knew that the flying sword was not useful to him at the moment. The longer he waited, the more trouble he would encounter. To be honest, he couldn't use it right now, and what he used the most was still a tree branch. The key point was that Jiang Ping understood that no matter who held the flying sword, as long as he summoned it, it would definitely return to his side. So Jiang Ping handing the flying sword to Grandfather Jiao was of no consequence as long as he could summon it back. However, that recovery token was something he desperately needed. Every time he practiced the Haoan art alone, he would collapse due to exhaustion of spiritual power. If he had this treasure, he could almost instantly replenish his spiritual power. Although Jiang Ping already knew that practicing the Haoan art alone was not the essence of the art, he couldn't guarantee that a woman would always be by his side. Practicing alone may be a waste, but at least the body tempering effect was excellent, which is why Jiang Ping wanted to exchange for that recovery token. As soon as Jiang Ping finished speaking, Lu Debao's directly placed the recovery token into Jiang Ping's hand, leaving Jiang Ping utterly dumbfounded. Was there really no room for negotiation? Why did he suddenly feel like he was being deceived? You dead fat man, honestly tell me, did you intentionally let me see this recovery token? And did you steal your grandfather Joe's spirit pet just to put on a show for me? The main purpose was to naturally display this recovery token in front of me and say, you dead fat man, is that how it is? Lu Debao's was at a loss for words. He couldn't understand how Jiang Ping's mind worked so quickly, how he had analyzed the crux of the matter in an instant. What could Lu Debao say now? All he could do was flatter Jiang Ping. Big brother, you are truly wise and powerful. My admiration for you flows like a never-ending river. Jiang Ping cursed. Get lost. You think you can trade that recovery token for my flying sword? No way. Lu Debao's looked at Jiang Ping, who had changed his mind, speechless. You were the one who said to trade, and now you're the one saying not to. Jiang Ping ignored Lu Debao's. He had already determined that Lu Debao's had more treasures, and he would definitely increase his offer. Sure enough, Lu Debao's looked at Jiang Ping, saying, Big brother, I'll add another recovery token. Don't worry, there won't be any more recovery tokens in this world. They are all for you. Is that enough? Jiang Ping never expected Lu Dabao to produce a second recovery token. Upon closer inspection, Jiang Ping estimated that this was Lu Dabao's limit. Without hesitation, he reached out and collected the 2 tokens, then handed the flying sword to Lu Dabao. Lu Dabao grabbed the flying sword and ran off, fearing that Jiang Ping might change his mind. He hurried to find his 9th granduncle. Jiang Ping no longer cared about those matters, but as Lu Dabao was leaving, he told Jiang Ping, Big brother, don't leave here. He'll be back soon. My vow of brotherhood with you is true. I genuinely regard you as my elder brother. Jiang Ping did not want to indulge him with more words. At this moment, he was sensing the flying sword and didn't forget to communicate his consciousness to it, saying, I will reunite with you soon. You please endure for a while. Though the flying sword was with Lu Dabao, it seemed to be something that belonged to Jiang Ping's bloodline. With just a thought, the flying sword understood him instantly. After Lu Dabao left, Jiang Ping curled up alone in his room, his head spinning like a top, carefully pondering over the current situation. That Lu Dabao, he only overheard that there are high-ranking disciples in the sect who are spies for the Blood Demon sect, but he didn't even get a good look at them. These 2 spies must be like 2 vicious wolves constantly watching me. If I take even half a step out of this Yinyang Hall, I fear I will be devoured until nothing remains. Time waits for no one. I, Jiang Ping, am increasingly eager to grow stronger, but how easy is it to become strong? Until now, I haven't even grasped the basics of foundation establishment. Jiang Ping muttered to himself, frowning, as if he could crush a fly with his brows. He had made up his mind, when he discussed life with Shanpeiji tonight, he would have to think this matter through carefully. If all else fails, I'll just throw my old face out like a rag and plead with Shanpeiji on how to help me establish. Most importantly, Jiang Ping thought of another matter. He had originally planned to venture out after establishing his foundation to find ways to grow stronger, searching for those densely packed blue dots on the search function. But given the current situation, with his meager abilities, going out would definitely lead to his demise. Just as Jiang Ping was racking his brain over future matters, Lu Dabao rushed back in a flurry. Jiang Ping didn't even want to glance at him, muttering to himself, I can't shake the feeling that I've suffered a significant loss. This fat fool, despite being so clueless, has more tricks up his sleeve than a lotus root. Lu Dabao approached Jiang Ping, looking as if he wanted to say something, but hesitated. Jiang Ping squinted and shouted impatiently, Speak quickly if you have something to say. Don't dawdle. I have no patience to waste with you right now. Lu Dabao scratched his head and said, Elder Ninth wants you to meet. At this point, Jiang Ping was even more irritated and retorted, Look at my frail body. Why don't you let him come to see me? In truth, Jiang Ping was just bragging with Lu Dabao. If Elder Ninth were present, he wouldn't dare to say such things. However, he was genuinely worried. Could it be that Elder Ninth discovered some secret about the flying sword? As Jiang Ping spoke, he discreetly sensed the situation. Although he was far from the flying sword, it was still his treasure, connected to him by bloodline. Fortunately, the precious flying sword showed no abnormalities, indicating that he hadn't exposed himself. But why was that old man looking for him? Seeing Jiang Ping hesitate, Lu Dabao patted his chest and said, Big brother, don't be afraid. He'll accompany you. Jiang Ping cursed inwardly, What good is your presence? You're just someone who would get beaten into a pig's head by your 9th granduncle. However, after a moment's thought, Jiang Ping realized that if he didn't go, it might be even worse. That old man was ruthless and had previously tried to throw him to his death. He couldn't tell if it was a genuine attempt or just a scare, but the force used was definitely real. This time Lu Dabayat was quite perceptive. Noticing that Jiang Ping was sitting on the bed, without moving, he directly pulled Jiang Ping's arms over his shoulders and walked toward the door. Jiang Ping was furious, thinking, if someone sees this, I'll be the laughingstock. At this moment, he was being carried like half a slab of pork by Lu Dabayat, heading toward Elder Ninth's residence. Inside, Jiang Ping's heart was in turmoil, like a drum beating incessantly. Finally, they arrived at Elder Ninth's door, and Jiang Ping took a deep breath, steeling himself, as Lu Dabayat carried him inside. Elder Ninth was seated in a chair, his face as dark as the bottom of a pot. Old thing, do you know your crime? Elder Ninth said coldly. Jiang Ping's heart tightened, and he hurriedly replied, Elder, I don't know what crime I have committed. Elder Ninth snorted, where did your flying sword come from? Speak the truth. Jiang Ping's heart raced like a stampede of horses as he quickly pondered how to respond, cold sweat beating on his forehead. Elder, this flying sword was something I stumbled upon by chance. Jiang Ping answered cautiously, his voice trembling slightly, his heart unsettled, fearing that if Elder Ninth was displeased, he would unleash his wrath upon him. Elder Ninth slammed his hand on the table, the sound making Jiang Ping's heart tremble. Stumbled upon it. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child that can be easily fooled? Elder Ninth's gaze was like a sharp sword, seemingly piercing through Jiang Ping and making him feel uneasy. Jiang Ping hurriedly explained, Elder, I'm not lying to you. That day I went to the mountains to gather herbs, and everything seemed ordinary. I bent down, carefully searching for precious herbs. Just as I was focused on those herbs, I suddenly felt my hoe hit something hard. At first I thought it was an ordinary stone, but when I dug it up, it turned out to be this mysterious flying sword. I looked around, but aside from the sound of the wind and the chirping of birds, there wasn't a single person in sight. So I foolishly took this flying sword. Since you cherish this sword, feel free to take it, consider it my tribute. Jiang Ping felt it was odd to refer to Elder Ninth as you, Elder, his heart feeling strange. After all, he was also a seasoned old man, seemingly older than Elder Ninth, yet here, he was having to lower himself to call him Elder. But with a lesser status, he could only mock his own unfortunate fate. After hearing Jiang Ping's words, Elder Ninth narrowed his eyes, suspicion and contemplation evident in his gaze. He truly wished he could immediately probe Jiang Ping's memories to see if this boy was lying. However, recalling that Shun Peiji had rescued Jiang Ping previously, he felt that if he were to deliberately make things difficult now, it would truly be disrespectful to the head of the Yinyang Hall. Meanwhile, standing aside, Lu Dabayat quickly said to Elder Ninth, Granduncle, my big brother is definitely not a liar. He is absolutely trustworthy. Elder Ninth snorted coldly, you're just a head full of mush, what do you understand? Elder Joe glanced at Jiang Ping and said, this sword is truly strange, it cannot recognize its master by blood. This only indicates that the sword already belongs to someone else. You old rascal, on that day you directly summoned the flying sword. Clearly this flying sword cannot exert such formidable power in your inept hands. The fact that it could withstand an attack from Shui Wuhan, the leader of the Blood Demon sect, only proves that the sword indeed has little to do with you. That day was merely a case of a blind cat stumbling upon a dead mouse. The flying sword possesses its own spirit. Upon hearing this, Jiang Ping quickly nodded like a garlic bulb. Elder Jiao is right, absolutely right. He knew deep down that only by obeying could he preserve his own life. Elder Ju looked at Jiang Ping and spoke in a threatening tone, this flying sword will stay here, I'll study it properly. Remember, do not mention this matter to Shun Peiji. If I find out that you went to her to complain, believe me, I have 1,000 ways to make your life worse than death. Jiang Ping nodded repeatedly, feeling a sense of helplessness and frustration in his heart. He truly felt powerless and unable to resist. However, he never intended to discuss this matter with Shun Peiji, as he understood that the flying sword would ultimately end up in his hands. It would be best to leave here quickly. He really did not want any more interactions with Elder Jiao. Nevertheless, Jiang Ping silently vowed to remember every humiliation he suffered today. He was also a man with flesh and blood with dignity. He understood that he would definitely find an opportunity to repay today's humiliation in kind. For now, he could only swallow his anger and endure. Lu Dabayat supported Jiang Ping as they slowly left Elder Jiao's residence. At this moment, Jiang Ping was drenched in cold sweat, as if he had just been pulled out of the water, feeling as if his heart was about to leap out of his throat. If this kind of torment were to happen a few more times, I fear my hard-earned 150 years of lifespan would take a serious hit. I don't know how many years I might lose. Jiang Ping silently lamented in his heart, feeling that fate was too cruel to him. Upon returning to the herb garden, he said nothing and simply turned to leave. Seeing this, Lu Dabayat suddenly asked, big brother, what are you going to do? I'll accompany you. Jiang Ping shot Lu Dabayat a glare, I'm looking for your sister-in-law, and you're coming along. At this moment, Jiang Ping was filled with irritation and had no mood to deal with Lu Dabayat. However, Lu Debeos was unperturbed, flashing Jiang Ping a bright smile. Big brother, remember not to spare any red pills. Big brother, rise up. Jiang Ping was so angered that he gritted his teeth, wanting nothing more than to grab a stick and give Lu Debeos a good thrashing. But thinking about it, he truly was not a match for this chubby guy, so he could only suppress his anger and storm off. Jiang Ping staggered out of the herb garden, heading straight for Shun Paizi's residence. He did not intend to tell Shun Peiji about his encounter with Elder Jiu today. He understood that if he had to rely on Shun Peiji to resolve everything, then what kind of man would he be? Even as an old man, he needed to have his own integrity and responsibility. What satisfied Jiang Ping was that ever since he obtained those 2 spirit return tokens, he could clearly feel subtle changes occurring in his body. The spirit return tokens continuously nourished his body, and Jiang Ping even felt that he could bid farewell to his walking stick forever, no longer relying on external objects and staggering around like a frail old man. Now, though he had not reached the level of walking swiftly, he was indeed walking faster, and his steps were becoming lighter, feeling remarkably at ease. Along the way, he encountered many disciples, all of whom greeted Jiang Ping. The disciples noticed that Jiang Ping was different from before. He appeared more spirited, as if he had been rejuvenated. Jiang Ping needed no announcement and walked straight into Shun Paizi's residence. As soon as he entered, he found Shun Peiji sitting there properly, seemingly waiting for him. In fact, long before Jiang Ping stepped into this place, Shun Peiji had already sensed his aura. She knew Jiang Ping would definitely come to find her. She just hadn't expected him to arrive so early. A hint of sweetness surged in Shun Peiji's heart. Although she was a woman, she also enjoyed the feeling of being remembered by someone. Though Jiang Ping seemed worthless in the eyes of others, just an old fool, it was this unremarkable old man who, at a critical moment when her life was threatened and everyone in the sect was watching, stepped forward to block an attack from Shui Wuan, granting her a moment to breathe, ultimately allowing her to injure Shui Wuan. Shun Peiji gazed at Jiang Ping, her lips slightly curling upwards, that smile like a flower blooming in spring, with a hint of tenderness in her eyes that seemed capable of melting one's heart. You've come, she said softly, her voice like a clear mountain spring gently flowing. Jiang Ping nodded heavily and walked towards Shun Peiji with firm steps. What brings you here today? Shun Peiji asked, her voice carrying a hint of happiness. Jiang Ping directly displayed a yearning expression, eagerly saying, what brings me here? Don't you know? Shun Peiji blushed furiously. Although there were only the 2 of them together, such a straightforward remark made it difficult for her to maintain her usual calm. Her heart raced like a startled deer, a mix of shyness and a hint of reproach. Jiang Ping looked at Shun Paizi's bashful demeanor, unable to help but swallow hard, a flicker of heat flashing in his eyes. However, Jiang Ping suddenly changed his tone, his expression becoming serious and solemn as he looked at Shun Peiji and earnestly said, I want to establish my foundation. Do you have any good methods to help me do it quickly? Shun Peiji was momentarily taken aback by Jiang Ping's abrupt change and didn't know how to respond. Initially filled with expectations for romantic moments, she found her rhythm disrupted by Jiang Ping's practical words. However, Shun Peiji quickly settled her emotions. She could understand Jiang Ping. After all, throughout the journey, Jiang Ping's strength had hardly shown any significant changes in the eyes of others. Moreover, the most important thing was that she had not genuinely paid attention to Jiang Ping's cultivation progress before. However, since they established their relationship, Jiang Ping's dedication and effort in cultivation had left a deep impression on Shun Peiji. One must know that Jiang Ping was not young anymore. To reach the 9th layer of the qi refining stage in such a short time was indeed extraordinary, even among some exceptionally gifted young disciples. At this moment, Shun Peiji looked at Jiang Ping with calm and gentle eyes, softly saying, establishing the foundation is the true beginning of a mortal stepping onto the path of cultivation. The qi refining stage is merely about drawing spiritual energy into the body, refining the meridians and bones. Once one reaches the foundation establishment stage, the body will actively absorb the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth, drawing it into oneself to further temper the physical body, nourishing oneself at all times and in all places. Moreover, after reaching the foundation establishment stage, certain spells can be practiced. Jiang Ping listened quietly, his brow slightly furrowed. He was not completely ignorant of these principles. He was simply eager to enter the foundation establishment stage as soon as possible, even if it meant hastily pushing things along. However, Shun Peiji clearly did not support such reckless thinking. The path of cultivation is like rowing upstream. If one does not advance, they will retreat. Forcing things along will only lead to an unstable foundation. Furthermore, given Jiang Ping's current physical condition, seeking to establish his foundation was indeed, he should continue to stay at the 9th layer of the qi refining stage, further strengthening his body and physical form, thus increasing the success rate of establishing his foundation. Coupled with foundation establishment pills, everything would yield twice the result with half the effort. After hearing Shun Paizi's explanation, Jiang Ping felt reluctant, but also understood the reasoning behind it. Many things cannot be rushed. He merely yearned to grow faster, to possess sufficient strength to face the various challenges and crises of this world. It seems that the idea of hastily pushing things along is not feasible. At this moment, Jiang Ping no longer tangled over the matter of establishing his foundation, thinking to himself, life is about enjoying the moments. Now is the time to savor the joyful times with Shen Peiji. Jiang Ping gently embraced Shen Peiji, whispering softly in her ear, Peiji, since we are not discussing cultivation at this moment, how about we take a rest? Shen Peizi's cheeks flushed slightly as she playfully punched Jiang Ping's chest, her eyes filled with anticipation and consent. Jiang Ping, feeling an unexpected surge of strength, steadily lifted Shen Peiji in his arms and walked slowly towards the bed. At that moment, the curtains hung gently and the candlelight flickered softly. Jiang Ping tenderly adjusted Shen Peizi's, clothing her skin as delicate as snow, glowing softly in the candlelight. She slightly closed her eyes, her long eyelashes fluttering gently, her expression serene. Jiang Ping also tidied his clothes and sat beside Shen Peiji on the bed. They leaned closely together, their body heat merging, and their heartbeats seemed to compose a warm melody. Jiang Ping's hand rested gently on Shen Peizi's shoulder, each movement infused with endless love and tenderness. Shen Peiji lifted her gaze, her eyes full of affection, and gently grasped Jiang Ping's hand. The two exchanged smiles, their faces reflecting a deep attachment for one another. In this tranquil atmosphere, their breaths were steady and warm, and a serene, beautiful emotion spread throughout the room. After an unknown amount of time, they remained sitting in each other's embrace. Jiang Ping gently caressed Shen Peizi's hair and softly said, Peiji, sometimes I feel like being with you is like living in a dream. In truth, Shen Peiji also felt that being a special cultivation partner to this old fellow was like In the past, many young and talented suitors had pursued her, yet she could hardly remember the exact number. However, how could she have ended up here entangled in such a peculiar relationship with this old fellow? It truly felt like a playful twist of fate. In countless silent nights, she had pondered how she had arrived at this point. Those young, handsome, and exceptionally gifted admirers had never moved her heart, yet she found herself inexplicably connected to this seemingly ordinary old fellow through a remarkable fate. Perhaps it was his bravery in critical moments, perhaps it was his sincerity and persistence that he occasionally revealed, or perhaps it was an inscrutable bond that brought them together. Shen Peizi's heart was filled with contradictions and entanglements along with lingering feelings. On one hand, she found the development of this relationship a bit unbelievable, as if everything was beyond her expectations and control. On the other hand, in her interactions with Jiang Ping, she gradually felt an unprecedented sense of security and warmth. This complex intertwining of emotions left her both bewildered and enchanted, unsure of how to face this unique sentiment. Shen Peiji sighed softly, her gaze softening. She looked at Jiang Ping's face, feeling a ripple in her heart as memories of their moments together flooded back. Those ordinary, yet warm instances. She knew that while Jiang Ping may not possess the handsome appearance and exceptional talent of those suitors, he had an exceptionally sincere heart. In this world of cultivation filled with deceit, such sincerity was truly rare. Shen Peiji slightly pursed her lips, a faint smile appearing at the corners of her mouth. Jiang Ping looked at Shen Peiji with gratitude, gently taking her hand again. The time spent cultivating with Shen Peiji had brought him great rewards. Jiang Ping clearly felt the dawning hope of foundation establishment. During the flow of spiritual energy, he experienced an unprecedented exhilaration, feeling invigorated and radiant. After careful consideration, he concluded that Shen Peizi's profound strength far exceeded his own, greatly enhancing his cultivation experience. However, there was another crucial factor: the two recovery talismans. He could keenly sense that he was continuously absorbing the spiritual energy within them, even feeling the miraculous changes occurring in his meridians and bones. At that moment, under Shen Peizi's gaze, Jiang Ping swiftly took out a jade bottle. Shen Peiji was slightly taken aback and scolded, "What are you doing?" Upon seeing the pill that Jiang Ping poured out, she was bewildered, unable to comprehend the meaning of his actions. Jiang Ping did not elaborate, directly placing the foundation establishment pill into his mouth without hesitation. The pill almost melted upon entry, instantly transforming into a surge of immense spiritual energy. Following that, Jiang Ping once again practiced the cultivation method with Shen Peiji. In an instant, a torrent of spiritual energy surged through Jiang Ping's body along the predetermined path of his spiritual energy, then gradually flowed into Shen Peizi's body. This overwhelming power surprised Shen Peiji, who thought to herself, what is this old fellow trying to do? Is he attempting to establish a foundation through a special cultivation method? How audacious! She had served as the sect leader for many years and had never heard of such a peculiar method. She deeply understood that Jiang Ping was undoubtedly attempting something bold, yet the situation had reached a critical point where he had to act. With no choice left, she could only choose to cooperate with all her strength. After circulating through Shun Paitz's body, that immense power grew even stronger. As it re-entered Jiang Ping's body, he gritted his teeth tightly, feeling as if this overwhelming power was about to burst him apart, with every inch of his skin and every muscle enduring immense pressure. Large beads of sweat rolled down his forehead, landing directly on Shun Paitz's cheek. His face turned crimson, and his body involuntarily trembled. Shun Peiji was anxious and frantic, channeling her own spiritual energy to help Jiang Ping guide and control the rampaging force. "Jiang Ping, you must hold on," she silently prayed in her heart. Jiang Ping endured the excruciating pain, his mind focused solely on one belief: he had to succeed in establishing his foundation. He concentrated, guiding the power to flow orderly through his meridians. Gradually, the raging power began to soften, slowly integrating into his body, nourishing his meridians. Jiang Ping felt as though his body was undergoing a transformative metamorphosis. At that moment, a crisp sound suddenly echoed from within him, as if some shackles had been broken. He was elated, knowing that he had finally succeeded in establishing his foundation. "Peiji, I did it!" Jiang Ping shouted excitedly, his eyes sparkling with joy. Shun Peiji let out a long breath, a look of relief and happiness spreading across her face. "Congratulations, Jiang Ping." Shun Peiji was utterly stunned by Jiang Ping's actions. How could this be possible? Whatever happened to this old fellow was always so unexpected. Can dual cultivation really lead to foundation establishment? This completely subverted her previous understanding. At this moment, Jiang Ping had successfully established his foundation, yet his body resembled a parched land, desperately in need of abundant spiritual energy to fill it. Jiang Ping was like a crazed old bull, tirelessly demanding. Shun Peiji never imagined that after this old guy established his foundation, he would seem to be completely reborn. She could clearly feel that Jiang Ping's essence, energy, and spirit had undergone a tremendous transformation. Although his hair remained silver white, like snow, his skin was noticeably finer than before. Most critically, Shun Peiji felt a sense of retreat at this moment, even harboring thoughts of escape. She simply could not imagine how this old fellow could possess such astonishing stamina. She had been keeping a close watch on Jiang Ping, convinced that he had not touched that red pill today. But this wait was becoming unbearably long. However, Jiang Ping was completely immersed in his cultivation, oblivious to Shun Paitz's condition. As a powerful being at the peak of the nascent soul stage, Shun Peiji was undoubtedly an excellent dual cultivation partner for Jiang Ping, not only strong, but also possessing a water spirit body. At this moment, Shun Peiji also sensed a subtle change in her own aura. She could clearly feel that her water spirit body was approaching perfection. This was something she had never dared to imagine before, but now the reality was right before her, making it impossible for her not to be excited. At her level, achieving further progress was more difficult than ascending to the heavens. Without a tremendous opportunity, Shun Peiji feared she might be stuck at this level for the rest of her life. However, today, after Jiang Ping's foundation establishment and their continued dual cultivation, it rekindled her hope of advancing to a higher realm. Though it was challenging, Shun Peiji felt it was not entirely impossible. As long as the timing was right, everything. Just as Shun Paitz's thoughts were racing, a stronger pulling force suddenly erupted from Jiang Ping. She felt her internal spiritual energy surge toward him like a flood breaching a dam. "Jiang Ping, stop!" Shun Peiji exclaimed involuntarily, but Jiang Ping seemed unaware, still lost in the fervor of his cultivation. Shun Peiji gritted her teeth, resisting the pulling force with all her might, sweat pouring down her forehead, her complexion gradually turning pale. She inwardly lamented that if this continued, she might be drained of her spiritual energy by Jiang Ping. Just when Shun Peiji felt despair, the pulling force from Jiang Ping suddenly weakened. He slowly opened his eyes, a glint of excitement flickering within. "Peiji, thank you," Jiang Ping said, his voice tinged with fatigue, but more so with exhilaration. Shun Peiji sighed with relief and collapsed beside him, playfully scolding, "You old fellow, you nearly took my life." Jiang Ping scratched his head, feeling a bit embarrassed. "I didn't expect it to turn out this way, but this time the gains from my cultivation were immense." At this moment, the fluctuations of spiritual energy in the room gradually settled, and both fell into a brief silence. After a while, Shun Peiji sat up, her expression serious, as she said, "Jiang Ping, although this dual cultivation has benefited both of us, this method of cultivation is too dangerous and should not be attempted recklessly in the future." Jiang Ping nodded solemnly. "I understand why I was impulsive this time. What are your plans next?" Shun Peiji inquired. Jiang Ping gently caressed Shun Paitz's cheek, and then said, "Peiji, actually, I originally intended to go out and train after establishing my foundation." Just as the words were on the tip of his tongue, he swallowed back the latter half. "But I can't tell you that I want to go out to find—" Jiang Ping was keenly aware that if he spoke those words, Shun Peiji would surely skin him alive. Even if he were to have other women in the future, he needed to let Shun Peiji slowly accept it, allowing for a buffer period. Upon hearing this, Shun Paitz's brows furrowed slightly. "What do you want to do outside?" Jiang Ping hurriedly explained, I want to seek out opportunities for breakthroughs. Since I arrived at the Yinyang Palace, I have never left the mountain. This time I want to explore the outside world while I still have the chance. Jiang Ping paused, then continued, however, Peiji, I no longer dare to leave the Yinyang Palace lightly. Previously, I received reliable news that an elder from the Blood Demon sect has been eyeing me just outside the Yinyang Palace, watching me closely. Most importantly, there are 2 high-ranking disciples within our Yinyang Palace who are spies for the Blood Demon sect, constantly monitoring my movements. As soon as I step out of the Yinyang Palace, that elder will immediately kill me, primarily to seize the flying sword on me. Shen Peiji truly had no knowledge of this information. When she heard Jiang Ping mention someone threatening his life, a fierce, killing intent instantly surged in Shen Pei's eyes. Anyone who dared to harm her or Jiang Ping had surely touched her reverse scale. At this moment, Shen Peiji could hardly wait to lead the sect to attack the Blood Demon sect and eradicate all those remnants. She understood well that since Shui Wuhan had already been injured, it was crucial to strike when the iron was hot. However, Jiang Ping had never thought to let Shen Peiji destroy the Blood Demon sect. Wars between sects often resulted in severe injuries and long-term recovery. He would never allow his issues to put his woman in a difficult position. When he spoke to Shen Peiji, his only aim was to have the outside elder eliminated and to slay all the spies within the sect, ensuring he could leave the Yinyang Palace without worries. Jiang Ping was not planning to leave the Yinyang Palace alone because he thought of Lu Dabaobeo. With him around, venturing into the world would pose no problem. To put it bluntly, Lu Dabaobeo's experience in roaming the world was 100 times richer than his. Shen Peiji gave Jiang Ping a highly affirmative look and said, I will quietly investigate the spies within the Yinyang Palace tomorrow. As for that elder from the Blood Demon sect, you need not worry, he is doomed. Jiang Ping gazed at Shen Peiji. Warmth surged within him. Shen Peiji shot a glance at Jiang Ping, feeling inexplicably happy whenever she did something for him. After Jiang Ping departed, Shen Peiji quickly donned her clothing, her figure flashing as she vanished from the Great Hall, reappearing outside the Yinyang Palace. The direction she headed was precisely the vicinity where the nascent soul elder Jiang Ping mentioned might be hiding. She concealed herself in the void, fully extending her divine sense to carefully inspect every potential hiding place. However, this scan caused her to frown slightly. She discovered many disciples of the Yinyang Palace, and these disciples were among the most trusted by the elders of the Yinyang Palace. Shen Peiji thought for a moment and guessed the reason. Most of these people were probably also after the flying sword in Jiang Ping's possession. However, there were certainly spies hidden among them. At this moment, Shen Peiji did not rashly attack these people. She knew very well that as long as there were spies, they would soon reveal themselves. These individuals would certainly attempt to convey messages to the outside, and she remained extremely vigilant in her investigation. She was determined to find the Blood Demon sect elder Jiang Ping mentioned, but this time Shen Peiji failed. Whether the other party had already left or possessed a treasure that concealed their presence, Shen Peiji did not detect any trace of them. Subsequently, Shen Pei's figure flashed and returned to her dwelling. She summoned her 2 most trusted disciples and conveyed instructions to them. After receiving the order, the 2 disciples swiftly departed. Shen Peiji aimed to conduct a thorough investigation of the Yinyang Palace, as she not only wanted to scrutinize the disciples, but also assess whether the elders had any ulterior motives. If so, Shen Peiji had no qualms about executing a thunderous crackdown to eliminate all those with malicious intent. The Yinyang Palace indeed needed a change in atmosphere, and the root of all this was because of Jiang Ping. 2 days later, the 2 disciples sent by Shen Peiji rushed back, their expressions extremely serious. Master, after our thorough investigation, we have identified 2 highly suspicious disciples. These 2 disciples are the direct disciples of the elder Xiao Fenlai from our sect's law enforcement hall, Zui Qingliang and Wu Changjun. Shen Peiji sat in her chair, her gaze sharp as she fixed her eyes on the 2 disciples below. The 2 appeared somewhat flustered, and Shen Peiji coldly snorted, saying, Is there something else you haven't reported to me? The 2 disciples exchanged glances and reported to the masters. Zui Qingliang and Wu Changjun have appeared in our sect's forbidden area. As soon as they spoke these words, Shen Peiji suddenly stood up from her chair. It is known that the forbidden area of the Yinyang Hall is off-limits to everyone. Only the next master can enter for cultivation and breakthroughs. At this moment, someone was indeed cultivating within the forbidden area, and it was Lin Miaoying. Shen Pei's mind raced. These 2 disciples actually went to the forbidden area. Shen Peiji looked at the 2 disciples again and said sternly, what were they doing in the forbidden area? The 2 disciples were now intimidated by Shen Pei's authority. They exchanged glances and stammered, replying to the master, we did not discover any unusual behavior from the 2 in the forbidden area. They have just been staying there without any movement. However, they still recounted everything they had seen to Shen Peiji. After hearing this, Shen Peiji had already formed a bold idea in her mind. Perhaps the nascent soul elder from the blood demon sect who was waiting outside to monitor Jiang Ping was merely trying to attract the attention of others, while the real target was Lin Miaoying, the heir of the next master of the Yinyang Hall. As Shun Peiji pieced everything together, she could not help but feel a surge of anger. How could the blood demon sect be so insidious? She began to reflect. Had she been enduring for too long? By not showing her power, she allowed these people from the blood demon sect to take advantage of her. They actually set their sights on the heir of the next master of the Yinyang Hall, which was tantamount to severing the foundation of the Yinyang sect. If this matter truly allowed the blood demon sect to succeed, what hope would the Yinyang sect have in the future? With this thought, Shun Peiji slowly sat back down in her chair, her face darkening as if it could drip with water. Originally, she had no intention of resorting to mass killings for the benefit of the Yinyang sect. Any sect war would inevitably cause significant setbacks to the sect's strength, requiring a long time to recuperate. But the blood demon sect was so devious. If she did not act now, and they fulfilled their ambitions, causing harm to Lin Miaoying, how could she, as the master, have the face to live in this world? Moreover, Lin Miaoying was Jiang Ping's childhood friend, someone he had grown up with. If anything were to happen to her, not only would she be unable to forgive herself, but Jiang Ping might even harbor resentment towards her. With this thought, Shin Paizi's eyes sharpened, and she waved her hand, directly dismissing the two disciples. Then her figure flashed like lightning, racing towards the direction of the forbidden area. Her divine sense spread out, and she immediately detected the auras of Zhuo Qingliang and Wu Changjun. At this moment, the two had not expected that Shun Peiji would come personally, and were unaware of how they had been exposed. Shin Peiji arrived beside the two, and instantly had their bodies tightly controlled. She cast a cold glance at Zhuo Qingliang, who was already pale with fear, trembling legs, and quivering eyelashes, nearly breaking down from fright. At this moment, the two directly released 2 puddles of yellow water from their pant legs, and the foul smell instantly permeated the air, causing Shun Peiji to frown tightly. She looked down upon them, thinking that in this world, only men like Jiang Ping truly deserved the title of man. These young individuals lacked any sense of responsibility, not even an ounce of courage. What use are you to the Yinyang Hall? Without hesitation, Shin Peiji pointed her finger directly at Zhuo Qingliang's forehead. Instantly, a torrent of memories flooded into her mind. At this moment, Shin Peiji was already clear about everything. She extended her fingers again and pointed to Wu Changjun's forehead. Similarly, Wu Changjun's memories were completely read by Shin Peiji. After finishing reading their memories, without a word, Shin Peiji stretched out her hand and instantly sent the two flying. At the moment they took flight, she reached out her hand towards them again. At this moment, a gigantic hand appeared in the void, pressing down instantly. Boom! The two were crushed into powder, dead beyond recovery. It turned out that after Shun Peiji read the memories of the two, she had completely verified her suspicions. They were not there to observe Jiang Ping's every move. Their main purpose was not to monitor Jiang Ping as instructed by the nascent soul elder outside, but to directly connect with the blood demon sect's master Shui Wuan. However, just as Shun Peiji was about to probe deeper into their memories, she felt that someone had tampered with their sea of consciousness. It was not a matter of altering their memories, but merely erasing a portion of them. Their true objective was to observe whether there were any powerful protections or restrictions in the forbidden area. As long as they could determine whether there were any protections or restrictions, they would pass this task to Shui Wuhan, and the matter would be complete. However, as Zhuo Qingliang and Wu Changjun were being killed by Shun Peiji suddenly in a cave over 1,000 miles away from the Yinyang Hall, a person was sitting cross-legged, recovering his strength. Suddenly, he spat out a mouthful of blood. This person was Shui Wuhan, seated within the cave, his eyes glowing with blood light, gritting his teeth, and shouting, "Very well, Shin Peiji, you are quite something. The day I recover will be the day your Yinyang Hall faces annihilation." After resolving the issues with Zhuo Qingliang and Wu Changjun, Shin Peiji returned to the Yinyang Hall swiftly. She understood that since Shui Wuhan had already taken action, he would not easily relent. At this moment, her expression was grave as she urgently summoned the elders within the hall to discuss countermeasures. Once all the elders had arrived in the main hall, Shun Peiji waved her hand, and a torrent of spiritual power surged forth, sealing the hall tightly with her power to prevent anyone from eavesdropping. Shin Paizi's gaze was sharp as she looked at the elders below, who exchanged glances. They had no idea what major event had occurred in the Yinyang Hall to make Shin Peiji so cautious and careful.